streaming as well.
Oh!
Yeah.
Like, oh.
People like stream. They love to come and chat.
Yeah.
You have a link to that stream? I'll toss it out to
let's see.
my peeps. They were asking if it was going to be streamed, and I'm like, I have no idea.
I am going to do the same because...
Alright.
Oop,
Sent it over Skype.
Last week I tweeted out that we were streaming, and I put a link to that on the tweet.
I'm trying to remember. Oh, there's the chat button. Everything moved on Skype since last time I used it. All right. Let me make sure I have the stream muted.
Tweet this out.
Yep. All right, and hit up my Twitter, folks.
All right. We can begin as soon as everybody's ready.
Okay.
Cool. I just let all my peeps know now, so.
Okay.
Should be good.
Ooh, I got tagged in a tweet by Nintendo Prime.
You're famous now.
Right? I still remembered your Twitter account. What's up with that?
Yes.
All right. So we have 28 people watching us do absolutely nothing.
Absolutely. We're looking at your Discord right now.
All right.
We're tweeting.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Hylians Gamescast. We're going to be starting as soon as I start recording.
Oh, Jesse.
Yeah. As soon as we start.
All right. Everybody ready?
Oh,
Everybody's ready.
Let's do it.
What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or Game Over Jesse, as some of you all may know me. And here with me, as always, is my faithful co-host, Daniel.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, and we have a very special guest here with us on the podcast, I think, for the first time.
Yep, never been. Been invited like 4 times.
Yeah. So,
well, man, it's because we love you.
Yes.
You brought us together, really.
Yeah.
I suppose. Origin stories.
So, Nate, go ahead and introduce yourself for those watching that may not know who you are.
Sure, I'm Nathaniel Rufflejance. Well, from Nintendo Prime here. Used to be editor-in-chief at Zelda Informer. That's how we all kind of found each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, I make a bunch of videos about news. I have podcasts as well. Game Over Jesse's on them. Well, at least he used to be frequently, but lately he's been a little tied up with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But if you think about it, it's like, if you know, in those movies when you see people like running towards each other on the beach, you know, and they lovingly embrace in the end, that's like this, except on the internet instead of the beach. So here we all are embracing.
All right. So for the podcast, we have a few different news stories. There is a rumor for a new 2D Metroid game in development. There is an article or an interview where the people that worked on the Metroid Prime trilogy discuss some of the cut content. We have a interview about why Monster Hunter World is not on the Nintendo Switch. And then we have some news from Nintendo about a delay. I don't know if it counts as a delay, but their online services. They announced a release date from I think it was 2019, and then they went back and corrected it to late in 2018. So I don't know if it counts as a delay because I don't know if we ever got a date prior to that. They just said it would be out sometime. But yeah. So before we get into all of that, we have some shout outs for the Patreon supporters. We have George Martinez, Megan Neal, Casey, Rusty Caulfield, Link Uses the Triforce, Tight-Lipped Gaming, Robbie Morgan, Shadow to Us, Lovable Christie, Daniel's favorite.
Yeah.
Keotine 15, Lunarium, and new Patreons Ashley, Monica, and Michelle. Thank you all for your support. So, starting off with our first news story. Former Metroid Prime developer reflects on cut content from the trilogy. This comes from Nintendo Life, and the quote reads, "Well, I just feel this game should have been either one or the other. Metroid Prime Hunters did this really well. It knew it was a multiplayer game and spent all of its marbles there. When we started development on Prime 2, multiplayer was actually going to be the focus. I think we internally thought of the project as Metroid Prime 2 multiplayer." I messed up there on the lines.
Oh, that's okay.
No, it's like the way that it's formatted for me. Anyways, internally we thought of the project as Metroid Prime 1.5. We were even getting to have the ability to play as a space pirate and have things like grabs and such. As we moved back towards a primarily single-player focus, we should have ditched multiplayer altogether. There was a ton of effort put forth to make multiplayer happen. We had to actually author third-person Samus animations. We had to have support for multiple players in a game world. We needed to author all new lower quality effects, add game modes, etc., etc. It all works. Yeah, it all works that look... God, I can barely read this. No, like something's wrong with my screen.
Would you like me to read it?
You can if you want. Like my screen's glitching out for some reason on me.
Okay, it's all work that took quality and mindshare away from the single player. Plus, as a Metroid fan, I feel like single player is how the IP should stay. Seeing multiple people run around as Samus never felt right. Then they go on to talk about Metroid 2 and the budget and the time and how they could have improved it. And he says, as for improvements, it's hard because development is so iterative. Many good things are built on the backs of failures, and many failures are the result of unmovable limitations. Like, for instance, I would have loved more differentiation between the light and dark worlds of Prime 2, but there was no time or money for it. We wanted to go the route of reusing environments between light and dark because we could make a schedule work that way. We thought it would be great, more bang for the buck. But of course, we could never find a technical solution to make the Dark World variants different enough to be interesting. And it turns out that completely dark worlds are just not fun. The first concepts had Samus pretty much walking around with a spotlight emitting from her, and it was just impossible to play. So the artists had to do a ton of work to make the Dark World variants work, and well, it was a ton more work than anyone had budgeted for and was completely unplanned. In fact, the Sanctuary Fortress was the only area built with this plan in mind, which is why both light and dark actually look visibly distinct and amazing. By the way, it's like the best part of the game.
It totally is. I agree.
But there was no time and movable limitation to really rebuild the rest of the game. But at least we got the Sanctuary Fortress. So what's the solution? Plan better, have less content, be smarter. It's hard to know. With the info we would have had then, what we could reasonably have done differently. All right, take a drink. Last part.
Yeah, it keeps going on, but just for now,
there's even more,
yeah, since we are trying to keep this a bit shorter than our usual podcast, what do you guys think about this so far with some of the cut content? Metroid Prime 2 apparently being a multiplayer focused game, and the developers looking at it as Metroid 1.5 instead of Metroid 2.
You know, it's it kind of is like almost an omen to how Federation Force turned out, you know? No, I never actually played it because at the time of it coming out, I didn't have a 3DS, and then when I got one, the multiplayer games I had no one to play with until very recently when we started talking about playing Triforce Heroes. But I feel like one of the defining features of Metroid games is that sort of isolation and, you know, being alone and exploring really creepy and different environments. So I can see that they decided to take it in a different direction. And there are some really strong points in Prime 2. Like, the beginning of the game is, like, eerie as hell. Like, it is some of the creepiest in the series. Then it peters off a bit, and then Sanctuary Fortress is, like, a huge high point. But, you know, I'm glad we got the game we did, because I feel like Prime 2... although there are some parts that overstay their welcome, overall it's a really solid game. So, Yeah, I guess the multiplayer is just kind of there at this point. I feel like they could have just left it out entirely and no one would have noticed. So,
Well, the
yeah.
multiplayer felt tacked on.
Yeah.
I mean, entirely tacked on. The thing is I could tell, like, when you did the what was it, the sanctuary area, like, it was amazing. And as you're going through it and you're dealing with the differences between the light and the dark, it just felt like this was the area that they intended the game to kind of be. And I never really understood why it wasn't, since, you know, when we talk about, obviously time constraints and budget was like the big deal here, but Metroid Prime was the best-selling Metroid game ever. So if there was a time to put a budget into a game, it would be the sequel to the best-selling game in a franchise. And they didn't really feel like they did that. It almost felt like they took more time with Metroid Prime to get it right than Prime 2. Sequel. And I mean, if you even look at the release schedule, I think, didn't it come out like 2 years later?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, that's just not enough time for a game like Prime.
Yeah. What do you guys think about? They mentioned having you play as a space pirate. Is that something you guys would have been interested in? Or
well, we kind of got that in Hunters. Isn't there a space pirate as a playable character in Prime Hunters?
I don't remember. I played so little of that one.
Yeah, but I mean, that would have been cool. I like the idea of universe building like that. Like the idea of Federation Force, for example, I think is cool to me. I think they could have marketed the game better. But like the idea of having other playable characters in this universe that aren't just Samus is really cool, because then it aids in the world building or universe building, I guess, since you're not just on one world. But yeah, I mean, I would have been down to play as a space pirate. It would have been really cool, especially maybe if they had like a turncoat character who, I don't know, you know, there's loads of possibilities. So
they mentioned some of the mechanics for the space pirate would have been wall grabs, and so
sure, yeah,
I'm sure that there's a lot of things that they could have done creatively to make it work out, but I look at it as like, one person would always want to be playing as Samus, and then whoever got the short end of the straw would have to be playing as the alternate character.
Little brother over here, younger sibling. Luigi forever.
Luigi.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I think I've always, in general, with like franchises I enjoy, I'm never against like playing as other characters. You know, Zelda franchise, you know, they want to give us a game playing as Princess Zelda that's not a CDI game. I'm all for that. They want to, you know, we could play as Tingle as an example, as a side game. I love those side games. Sorry, Tingle, you're my hero boy. But like I had nothing against, like, even like in Federation Force, when you don't get to play as Samus at all and you're just playing as, like, you know, the 4 of basically the exact same characters kind of working together. Like, the only issue with that game was, obviously, it was announced at a time we didn't know more Metroid was coming, like single player focused. So I think it's important that, like, if they added the idea of like the space pirate and they were doing this other stuff, that they do it more like they did with Federation Force, with the the assurance that we're going to get a Samus focused game as well. Like, we're not going to get one or the other. So I feel like that's going to upset the fan base. So I don't know. I'm all for it, as long as they don't like just do one or the other. Like, imagine if they did, you know, even Triforce Heroes, where like it's Link split into 3 or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But they did that and Breath of the Wild wasn't coming. That was our main game for the next 5 years. Like, that's not gonna fly. Yeah. I don't think, with most all the fans.
No.
So this
same for Metroid.
All right. So a final thought on this before we move on to the next topic. Is multiplayer something that you guys want to see with Metroid Prime 4, like a co-op story similar to how Halo does it?
Nah.
No.
You know what?
You wouldn't be a fan?
I'd play it, and I would have to reserve my judgment for that. Like, I do enjoy multiplayer games or co-op games, like, but I don't know. Like for me, that's not what I think of when I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go play some Metroid, you know. But it's the same thing with Zelda, right? I don't think like, oh, I gotta go play Zelda, get my friends together. You know, my initial thought is I'm gonna go and sit by myself and play Zelda. So, I mean, it worked with Zelda. We got Four Swords twice and Triforce Heroes now, and I think what Nate said, like, as long as we know that there's something else as well, then sure, yeah, it could be cool.
Don't discount the Tingle Tuner. Come on now.
Oh,
Not gonna let Tingle
I
off.
will discount it.
Yeah, I don't want to see them even play around with co-op in this game. Maybe if they do a Prime 5 or whatever. Because right now, the big fear everyone should have for Prime 4 is that this isn't Retro Studios. It's a completely different group of people making this game. So I think what Metroid fans, at least like me as a Metroid fan, want to see this studio prove they can make an amazing Prime game. And the amazing parts of Prime in the past have been single player focused. So let's get that right, and then you can worry about bringing other aspects of it out if you would like. Maybe as a DLC, I don't know. But yeah, I feel like they need to focus on the single player because we just got Federation Force. The multiplayer in like Prime 2 just felt like it should have never been there in the first place. Let's just get the single player right, and then we'll worry about multiplayer in the future.
That's also part of the issue.
What was that, Daniel?
Part of the issue as well is that if you are to have a co-op campaign in any story, you have to make sure that both players or both player characters are equals in some way. So with Federation Force, as my continually coming back example, they're just Federation Marines, so they're equals to each other, right? But if you have a Prime game that's primarily co-op, you need to then introduce a character that's Samus's equal. And Dark Samus. Let's not Dark Samus, please. I mean, so I mean, you like, I don't know, there may be another bounty hunter or something, but then that kind of takes some of the charm out of Samus, because part of the cool thing about Samus is that, like, she'll take on an army. She's a one-man army kind of thing, so to speak. So, figurative one-man army, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to see someone as powerful as Samus. She like really takes down anyone in her path. So, you know, she's the one that like they call when we sent an army of troopers to SR-388 and they all died. So we send Samus alone and she takes care of it. She cleans up. She's like the James Bond of her universe, right? So it's like
best bounty hunter to ever live, man.
Exactly. So like I don't know. I want to see. I don't know if I want to see a character that can stand toe to toe with her and not be a villain. You know, if they introduce a character that Samus is equal, like Dark Samus, for example, they gotta be your rival. They gotta be a villain. I don't know. Otherwise, it loses its charm for me. Maybe I'm thinking too deep into that.
You don't just want to add some star bits to it and have someone hold the other Joy-Con and just wave around and collect them? Sorry.
The thing is, like, when they shoehorn co-op like that, or like a Cappy in Mario Odyssey, it's the same thing. You can shake the Joy-Con, and you know what?
Control
That's actually worse. I don't know if you've tried playing like that, but I tried it, and every time Cappy even zips in front of Mario, he does the bounce jump, and it's just like, oh god, I can't even control Mario when I'm doing
that kind of stuff. I think is good, like if you're playing with your kids, right?
Yeah.
Like I play, Odyssey with my daughter, and we'd go back and forth between who's controlling Cappy, who's controlling Mario, and she loved that. But if you're like an equal as like a friend, like if it's Eric and I sitting down, or even you and me, Daniel, or Jesse, like we're sitting down playing, it's super annoying. Like we both want to be the thing that does everything. Neither of us are the thing that does everything. It just
we don't want to be Cappy.
Limited versions of ourselves. It's just not.
Yeah, it's. See, I was thinking the perfect DLC for, this is a bit off topic, but I always thought the perfect DLC for Odyssey was like charge $5 and be like, now you can play as Luigi. Almost everyone that has Mario Odyssey would go ahead and buy that just for the multiplayer experience.
We're gonna Smash Bros. This thing.
If Luigi had Mario's closet, like outfits, all that, so you start out with Luigi's clothes, and then you could be Luigi wearing Mario's clothes, and there's just something funny about that. It's funny actually. About I'm going to just slightly off topic here, but in Mario Odyssey as an Easter egg, depending on what clothes you wear when you confront Bowser at the very end, he'll say a different line, and if you go to him wearing Luigi's clothes, he'll basically say that you look familiar, but he can't quite remember where he's seen you before. It's like, oh god,
that's horrible.
How far will Nintendo take this joke?
No comment on that.
All right. So our second piece of news comes from Nintendo Life, where they say Capcom explains again why Monster Hunter World isn't coming to Switch. But the way that this is worded, I don't know if this is the same quote that I was reading earlier, but it says, "We don't have any plans for the Switch at the moment. Part of the reason is that the title has been in development for almost 4 years. At the time we had to commit to our hardware choices, we decided on using the most powerful current generation consoles available at the time, which was the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So the decision was made before the Switch was even announced or on sale. It's also because for every title we decide what the best fit for the hardware is for the concept. We don't just look at everything. It's more like, if we want to achieve this kind of game concept, where's the best place to achieve that? And for this title, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were the best fit for us." Now, I think, am I wrong in saying that traditionally Monster Hunter has been primarily on handheld consoles?
I think so, yeah. There's a lot of them on 3DS.
When Nintendo signed the exclusivity contract with them, they were mostly on handhelds. I mean, they always released like a version, like Monster Hunter Tri, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on Wii U and Wii, but most of the mainline ones were on 3DS. But before that, when they were on PlayStation, like PS2 and stuff, like that was all console. But I don't like this excuse. I don't like this excuse at all, because Capcom, as we know, was directly involved in the Switch while it was in development. They're the reason it has the amount of RAM it has. It sounds, because the only reason I say that, because there's a quote that's not here, it's in a different story from this week, where they also said that all future Monster Hunter games, they would have to consider the Switch because of how well it's selling. It's like, I mean, so you basically just didn't count the Wii U at the time because it was selling like crap, and didn't even consider the Switch because you didn't think it was going to sell well. That's basically what I get out of it. And I understand, like, there's no shot of this game being ported. It was made to fully take advantage of Xbox One, PlayStation 4, whatever. But it's just a little disappointing when you string along a fan base and you build it up on a Nintendo system, and then finally when that contract's over, you're like, now we're just going to abandon the Nintendo fans with this next one. It's kind of like a slap in the face. It's probably what Bayonetta fans felt like when Nintendo signed Bayonetta 2's contract. Like, they felt like they got slapped in the face too.
Yeah, so you said that you don't think there's any possibility for this to come to the Switch, because he starts out saying there aren't any plans for the Switch at the moment. Yeah. So do you think they're just not even trying to like tinker with it to get it to run on the Switch? They're just fully focused on the PS4 and Xbox One?
Yeah, they're focused on where they're focused. I think the reason, like, when he says we don't have any plans at the moment, I feel like they're leaving that door open because if the sales just bomb, they're going to run to Switch because that's what's selling in Japan, and that's where Monster Hunter sells really well. But I don't think the sales are going to bomb because PlayStation 4 has enough units out in Japan, at least, that it's probably going to sell well. I know they're trying to make this to appeal to the West, but, I mean, the brand name itself doesn't appeal to the West. It's kind of got that Japanese feel to it, so it's kind of like, we'll see if this can be the game that breaks through, because they really want to break through in the U.S. That's like the big goal with this game. Like, we need to hit that U.S. market. But yeah, I don't think it's going to come to Switch unless the sales are bad and they're trying to salvage it. And even then, you know, you gotta get concerns, because what's everyone going to talk about when it comes to Switch? Well, it's going to be another late port. It's going to be downgraded FPS, downgraded visuals, and at that point, are people going to pick it up again? Probably, because we bought Monster Hunter Double Cross for like the third time. So, but...
Well, what are your thoughts on this, Daniel? Are you a Monster Hunter fan at all?
No. I haven't played any of them, so yeah. I mean, I don't feel very strongly about it either way. I do think that like the more games that come to Switch, the better. Just because I want, the console to appeal to as many people as as it can, because I want to support the brand I love. Which makes me sound like a sellout, but that's who I am. So,
yeah, like
Sellout.
as great as this game looks, even on like the standard PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, as great as the game looks, if they did bring it over to the Nintendo Switch, I think it would be at like 720p and then like the lowest quality textures that they could put on the game, and then it would run at like barely 30 frames, because like I'm not sure what the size of the world is in this game, but it seems like technically there's a lot going on. So if they did bring it to the Switch, it would be a serious downgrade from the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and then I don't think anyone would be that interested, because I think it would take long enough time to where anyone who wanted to play the game would have already played it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sure.
why like get the lesser version on the Switch?
As I said, the only reason would be if it doesn't sell well in Japan, and Switch is blowing up in Japan. So hit the Japanese audience with the Switch version. I mean, the Japanese audience kind of ate up the Hyrule Warriors Legends version on 3DS versus the Wii U version. So it's kind of like where the Japanese audience goes is kind of where this is like, that's why they signed that exclusivity contract with Nintendo in the first place. Was okay, well, Vita and PSP aren't really doing it for us. Let's stick with Nintendo in Japan. But I don't think they're gonna do it with this one. I think what'll happen instead is if this one like tanks in sales, they're just gonna be like sprinting to Switch with the next Monster Hunter, and it'll be more traditional, more Japanese focused, like it's always been. But we'll see. This one could blow up, and we might never see another game on Switch again from Capcom's own Switch.
I feel like if this is where they've sort of built their fan base already, though, that they should like kind of see it through. I don't know. It just feels like they're kind of jumping ship just because they can. You know,
I mean, we have a Monster Hunter game on Switch. It just hasn't released outside of Japan yet. They ported over Double Cross, and I played the demo of it on Switch. It runs fine. It looks good. Of course it does. It's a 3DS game. But I don't know. It's a little disappointing, but as I said, look what happened to the Bayonetta fans. Granted, different situation, because that franchise just wouldn't have any more games if it wasn't for Nintendo. Whereas Monster Hunter is popular enough, especially in just Japan alone, to continue. But I don't know. I've not played a ton of Monster Hunter since Ultimate on Wii U, because I sunk like hundreds of hours into that, and like there's no end. There's no end to the game. Like that's just the way it is. That's how Monster Hunter is. It grabs you, never lets go, and that's why I keep wondering how they can keep releasing more of them when no one's done with the other one. I don't think there's anyone in the world that's got 100% run of Monster Hunter. There probably is somewhere. I don't know, but it's
probably somewhere.
It's crazy. Like, you think Breath of the Wild takes forever, you think Xenoblade takes forever. Go play a Monster Hunter game. Get back to me. That's it. We're becoming Monster Hunter Prime over here now. 24-hour streams of Monster Hunter.
Oh goodness.
Double Cross, Japanese version that I can't read.
All right. Daniel, do you want to take us into the next news story, since you fell in love with Samus Returns, the rumor for another 2D Metroid?
I don't have the article open in front of me, but the rumor is that we're expecting another 2D Metroid game. And I would love that, because I love me some 2D Metroid. What's funny is there was a Game Informer interview it was actually shortly before Breath of the Wild released, where he took like the little coin, put them into 3 cups, and shuffled them around. And then when Miyamoto and Onuma, they lifted the cup, there was just a piece of paper that said 2D Metroid, please. And that gave me a good laugh. But yeah, so that's the rumor. If you care to elaborate on the source and details of the rumor, that would be great.
All right, since Daniel doesn't have the page up, this comes from Nintendo Life, who gets it from NeoGAF. We're actually a NeoGAF member. I don't think NeoGAF is really around anymore. Are they? Didn't they?
They still exist.
They had that.
It's funny because they said NeoGAF member, but their source is Reset Era. It actually comes from the new place, the Reset Era place.
Okay. So it says a NeoGAF member who was talking about Samus Returns as early as 2016 has come forward saying that another 2D Metroid has just entered the earliest stages of development. With the team from an external developer, understandably this is to be met with some skepticism, as the source is a message board poster who has had some accurate predictions, but it would certainly be an interesting development if true. There was a gap over a decade between the last 2D Metroids, but given the ending of Samus Returns and the excellent reception that the game received, perhaps Nintendo is planning to double down on Samus 2D adventures. Now, I think this is like saying, like, starting a rumor saying that, oh, there's going to be another 2D Metroid is as obvious as someone saying there's going to be another 2D Zelda game. Like, I don't necessarily think it would be, like, you could say it's a rumor, but it's one of those things that I feel is common sense. Like, anytime something like that comes up, it's like, if it doesn't come this year, it'll likely come next year or the year after. Like, we're eventually going to get another 2D Zelda game or, like, another 2D Mario game, just because that's, like, Nintendo has the whole team dedicated for 2D Mario games and 2D Zelda games, everything. And with this 2D Metroid, whether it is a follow-up, something that ties into Samus Returns, or if it's a new story altogether, I think as well as Samus Returns sold, and its own line of amiibo sold well, I think this is just like an obvious statement that almost anyone could really make. Because, like, it would be one thing if someone mentioned a game that hasn't released in 20 years, and they were like, hey, there's a new blah, blah, blah coming out.
A new Star Tropics. Wow, that would
be... yeah, like that, or like, hey, Mother 4 is coming out. Like, that would be something that would be more of a rumor. I think this is more of something that would be common sense. But what are your thoughts on this, Nate?
Obviously, skepticism towards any source that comes from a forum is to be had, even if it's Reset Era, like the replacement for NeoGAF.
But Nate,
his history of people.
His uncle works at Nintendo.
Well, I mean,
his uncle's friend's doctor's veterinarian's cousin.
He's neighbors with Miyamoto.
I wish Nintendo Life would have went into some more details. See, I'm part of Reset Era, so like I've read this a long time ago. Well, basically, this is a guy who, for many, many, many months, kept saying Metroid 2 Remake is coming. It's happening. Like, it's official. I don't know why they haven't announced it yet. Blah, 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 blah. And then it happened. And this came at a time when he was trying to explain why ASMR 2 got shut down. Like, oh, another Metroid 2 Remake got shut down. Like, it's because they're working on it. Like, I don't know why they're not talking about it. Especially with all the bad PR from this, it's a good time to announce it. Be like, hey, look, this is why it got shut down, because we actually have one in the works. Even though that's not really why it got shut down. If you know about anything with fan games and Nintendo, just stop making them. Nintendo's always going to shut them down, especially if you're using any of their branding. But yeah, I don't know. We're in a weird situation right now, I think, with 2D games and certain key franchises. Zelda and Metroid, I think, being one of them, because like we talked about how there used to be like a separate 2D team for Mario, but then they did Mario Maker, which has made you not really need any more 2D Mario games. And then they just combined the handheld and they built that new building and combined all the handheld and console people together, and now they have a hybrid system. And literally the entire Zelda team was making Breath of the Wild. Yes, we still got Triforce Heroes, but that was developed by Grezzo, headed up by a guy from Nintendo. So like we're at this point where there isn't really separate teams anymore for this kind of stuff. It's all one team making one game for one platform. And now there's a brand new team making Metroid. And we don't know what, obviously Metroid 2 Remake was done as well, but I don't know if there's actually like a dedicated team to making like a 2D Metroid. That doesn't mean there can't be one in the works. Like this guy, if you go through some of the stuff he said, he's talking about how this isn't actually like a new game being made per se. It's one they've had in the works before, and then they kind of like deadpanned it for a while, and now like with Metroid Prime coming and stuff like that, and the success of the remake, kind of reviving it, being like, you know what, we have this thing kind of just sitting on the shelf. Let's finish it and get it out the door for whatever, for 3DS or Switch, and that's fine. That's Nintendo's probably got tons of stuff they've shelved over the years that they can just pull out and work on. But I just don't think it's so. I mean, this rumor might be true, but I just don't know about 2D games in these franchises being guaranteed anymore when with the primary platform moving forward isn't going to be 3DS, it's going to be Switch. And all the best-selling games on Switch are traditional 3D console games. Like the best-selling Metroid games of all time, they're not Metroid 2, they're the Prime series. So it's kind of like it makes more sense financially to focus on where the sales are. Now, obviously, the counter is 2D games are cheaper to make. You don't need to sell as much. But, there's a reason that Nintendo puts a lot of emphasis on a game like Breath of the Wild and not as much on Triforce Heroes and Link Between Worlds. Because they make way more money off a game like Breath of the Wild than Triforce Heroes and Link Between Worlds. So it'll be interesting to see this. Maybe they have another. Maybe that'll be a 3DS game as another filler game for the end of this year or something.
Yeah, I look at this and I don't know if they would come out with like a completely brand new Metroid game. I could see this being more of like a port of Samus Returns for the Switch, because I think that is something that would be very likely, and I think they would do that because if the game's already finished on the 3DS, just port it over to the Switch, that would take a lot less time than creating another remake or another game. So, and then if that does really well on the 3DS and the Switch, then I think that would be enough for Nintendo to be like, okay, let's make another brand new 2D Metroid game using this same engine, but just release it for the Switch. And they also have Metroid Prime 4. I think it would be interesting if they experimented with sort of like what they did with Mario Odyssey and A Link. They took that A Link Between Worlds mechanic to where you could switch between like the 2D when you turn into like a painting on the wall or whatever. There were almost entire levels in Mario Odyssey, or not entire levels, but there were parts of it that were the size of a traditional level from a 2D Mario game. So if they can have that back and forth and bring that concept into Mario Odyssey, I would like to see them do something similar with Metroid Prime 4. Like maybe you get somewhere the camera angle changes and suddenly it looks like you're playing a 2D level of Metroid instead of a 3D. So that's my hopes for Metroid Prime 4. I know it's a bit off topic, but I could see them doing this more so than like...
I hope they don't do that.
No? You're not a fan?
I'm not trying to shoot the idea down, but like it worked because it was like we've never seen a game do this. So now if they start doing it, it's like now you're just like copying your own ideas over again. Like is the next Zelda game gonna have us go 2D, go like Between Worlds on us again?
Well, you see, like with Mario Odyssey, whenever I seen it after it had a few trailers come out, my first thought was it's like someone took a bunch of concepts from The Legend of Zelda and put them in a Mario game. You have the hat that talks it to you. You can sort of become enemies or whatever, like in Phantom Hourglass when Zelda turns into the... Is it Phantom Hourglass? Like Zelda's spirit goes and...
Spirit Tracks.
Spirit Tracks. Okay. And then like there's the wall mechanic that was taken from A Link Between Worlds. So there was like several different things that I seen from Zelda that it's like, oh, well, they just must have been a really big fan of that mechanic. And then thinking about how something similar could be added to Metroid, that's just where my thoughts are, because it seems like they are, apparently they're a fan of that gameplay mechanic, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it pop up somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to put it past Nintendo. They borrow from themselves all the time. They can't. You're allowed to do that. It's okay. People who aren't, other companies out there that make games borrow from games they're inspired by as well all the time. I just feel like it works so well in Odyssey because you were talking about a game that its goal was to bring back all the old school Mario fans from the N64. So you had all this feel of Mario 64 and even Sunshine mixed with classic Mario. And like even when you talk about They had, you know, the hat that could talk. Like, I mean, okay. I mean, I guess you could say it's a reference to Capcom's Ezlo if you want. I guess I personally don't see that per se, but then again, the hats serve different purposes. So I guess you know, who knows how much of that's copy. But like, just like seeing what they did with Mario and being like, yeah, just do that with Metroid. All those ideas they might have copied, they did it in new and fresh ways. I don't know what new and fresh ways you can make 2D Metroid on the side of a wall, not basically be the exact same idea as Mario. Whereas like A Link Between Worlds, like when you went on the wall, you were just traversing. You weren't playing 2D Zelda. It was used as a traversal mechanic. Or occasionally, you know, like you could pop in a wall and an enemy could not hit you. But
I think also part of what made it work in Mario Odyssey is because it was in very limited segments, you know. In A Link Between Worlds, it, like you said, it's traversal, so you can any wall, you just pop onto it and then slide on over.
And we got to consider story as well.
Like I don't know how they could explain that in universe.
It could have been limited. Yeah, like it could have been limited in A Link Between Worlds to what they did with it because they had to make a story reason that you could become part of the wall. Where in Mario, there's no explanation; you just do it. So walk into a war pipe and it just feels right because it's Mario. Like Metroid has actually got some heavy story at times, and it's kind of for a game that's about isolation. There's a lot of story. So like having a story reason for you to pop into a wall and become 2D just feels not like Metroid. But then I mean, it might be a better approach than what they tried to do with Other M, where they tried to combine like classic Metroid gameplay and 3D space gameplay with a third-person perspective. But I don't know. I liked Other M, so I'm not. I realize a lot of people hate it, so I'm probably not the right person to talk to about this idea, maybe.
All right, well, final thoughts on this rumor before we move on. Do you think that it's possible or likely that a new 2D Metroid game is in development right now?
Sure. Samus Returns did well. It was reviewed well, and personally, I just really keep my fingers crossed. More Metroid for me. Yeah.
I can see it as another filler game for 3DS.
Really? You think it would be for 3DS, not Switch?
I don't think they're going to release it on Switch because I don't think another Metroid game's coming to Switch till Prime 4 is out.
All right.
They're going to want to hit when they hit their major franchises on Switch. They're going to try to hit it with their best before they hit it with anything else. Then again, they did do Fire Emblem Warriors, so.
All right.
True.
Well, our last news story again comes from Nintendo Life. It's about the Nintendo Switch online service. Nintendo Life says Nintendo keeps changing the Nintendo Switch online service launch date. And what basically happened was they updated their website, said the online service would be coming out in 2019, I believe, and the next day or within the next day or so, they came back, updated it once again to read online services and features, including online gameplay, are free until the paid Nintendo Switch online service launches in 2018. So, I don't know. I was talking about this a little bit before when I mentioned that I don't know if this could necessarily count as it being delayed. I know they gave like an estimated time on when it would be coming out, but then they just keep pushing it back. They never like set like an in stone date, like it's coming out April 8 or June 22nd or whatever. It's just, hey, it's beginning of 2018 or it's the beginning of 2019. No, we're wrong. It's the end of 2018. So like they keep going back and forth. But what are your guys' thoughts on this? Do you think this is something that Nintendo, like, do you think it's that important for Nintendo? Because I look at it as like they only have like a handful of games that you could really play online, but then there's other stuff tied in with the service, like getting the free game every month. So what are your thoughts on this, Nate?
Let's see. Well, for starters, apparently, if I remember right, Game Explain said that it was just a typo. They talked to Nintendo, and Nintendo said, oh, yeah, it was a typo. So the 2019 date was just a genuine mistake. Typos happen. I should know. I've made plenty of them in my life. But beyond, the fact that it's not, 2019, even if it was that one, that would be considered a delay because last official date was sometime in 2018. Just like the Breath of the Wild, sometime in 2015, then sometime in 2016, then it was 2017. So it would still be considered a delay. But how important it is very, very interesting. I don't think it has anything to do with Switch's momentum, anything to do with sales. No one's buying it because of the online system. No one's buying it. I would like to see what their numbers are for like usage rate of their Nintendo Switch Online app that can only be used with one game. I'm very curious to see how much it's being used, and if it is being used, are people actually voice chatting with it, or are they just going on there to order gear for Splatoon? Because that's like the best use of it right now, and you could just do most of that in the game anyways. I know there's exclusive gear, but it's not any better than what you get in the game. So it's just weird to me. Here's the thing, like, if Nintendo wants, like, they've talked about how they want Splatoon 2 to kind of be in the esports kind of thing and stuff like that. I feel like if that is the case, then having a solid online system is essential. And the biggest scare right now that we don't have, this isn't included with their online system, especially when they're charging for it, I'm going to be very disappointed. We need cloud saving.
Yeah, or like at least an easier way to.
Well, you drop your Switch right now and it breaks, you're done. You lost all your save data. Mm-hmm. It's gone.
They also had didn't they have the same situation with like 3DSs and Wii U? Like it was on 3DS, like you had to have another 3DS right beside you, and then it completely erases one of the 3DSs and then moves it over.
It's been an issue for a while, and again, it hasn't stopped sales in the past, but now we're in a new era. Everyone else has it. Your phone has it. There's no reason that the Switch can't have it when, if you're playing online stuff anyways, you're obviously connecting to the internet. Yeah. So having it doesn't mean you can't have a local save. Like, people get confused. Cloud saves don't replace your local save. They're just a backup. Mm-hmm. If something happens, you can go download your save file. You lose your Switch and buy another one, go download your save file. But beyond that, I have a lot of desires for the online system, but it's just one of those things that I don't think it's vitally important for anything but the image of Switch. Just like I think it's important for Switch to finally get Netflix and other stuff as well. Because it's all about, it's a system that is selling right now on the premise of taking, AAA kind of games on the go and playing them anywhere, and that's amazing and that's great. But when people start looking for what am I doing when I'm not playing games, well, I'm not using my Switch. Mm-hmm. When you could still be, checking out the news articles. Yeah, that news thing is great, but it's not as robust as it could be. You're not getting in a lobby on Switch and chatting with your friends. You might be going on Discord or whatever instead. You're not, which, by the way, Discord offered to partner with Nintendo. Nintendo's not going to take the bite on that, but Discord publicly,
I wish they did.
publicly tweeted out, "Hey Nintendo, we want to make your online chat system."
Yeah, I think that's something that Nintendo they just want to be in 100% control of it instead of having.
Yeah, that's the Nintendo's not going to let anyone else control their community. There are people that actually don't want it to come because all the Splatoon players, Mario Kart 8 players, all this now I got to pay to play against people when I've never had to pay before, even though it's only like $20 a year or something like that.
Yeah, it was really cheap.
So I don't view it as essential for usability in terms of that's what makes the Switch sell. It's just essential for the, I guess, the opinion of Switch. Like, having the Switch constantly get better over time is important for a platform whose hardware isn't going to be getting any better. So as the hardware gets older and other things start surpassing it, even phones start catching up. If you start saying, yeah, now you're buying older hardware that a phone 2 years from now is more powerful than and has all this functionality that for some reason a tablet that you connect to Wi-Fi and has a touchscreen doesn't have, would be worrisome, I guess is the way to put it. Mm-hmm. And then again, Nintendo just doesn't care. As they say, Nintendo's going to Nintendo, so they can just be like, you know what? We're just not talking about it because we're really never going to launch this thing. We decided against it, but if we say anything publicly, people are going to get mad.
Well, that's kind of what I've been thinking, is that they announced what they originally wanted for the online services, and with all of the feedback they've gotten, I think that has led them to make these delays from when it was first supposed to come out until now. It's supposed to come out, I assume, around summertime or late into 2018. Sure. So I think they seen the feedback. They were also wanting Miitomo to be this huge thing. We can see that they're canceling that now. It was supposed to tie in to like a bunch of different stuff with Nintendo and your unlock stuff and everything, and they just canceled that. And I think they're switching their minds on what they want it to be, because I think it's the longer it goes without us getting the Nintendo Online service, the more I see it becoming what people want it to be, and just like doing away with the smartphone app and just focusing on, okay, we're going to put the software itself onto the Switch. That way you can chat and everything on the Switch. Because I always go back to like the 3DS. When you played Star Fox 64 3D, you could play multiplayer online and see the video of the person that you're playing against. Like, it wasn't just voice chat, it was actual video chat while you're playing the game. If the 3DS can do that, then the Switch should. Like, it doesn't have a camera, but
yeah, it can't. Yeah.
Like, it would.
That'd be something the app on the phone should do if they were going to stick with it.
Yeah,
like it should have a video option to it. It's just a weird thing. Like, and now we're in an era where like games as a service is starting to become a real thing out there. Whether it's PlayStation Now with their streaming service, I'm not saying they should stream. There's issues with that too. But then you even have like Xbox Game Pass, and now they're adding their full AAA games day one to that thing for $10 a month. And you have Nintendo sitting here with like, hey, we don't really have a true universal account system yet. And now we're going to start charging you money for access to these things that are like the bare bones basics of what every single online system in the world has. And it's just kind of interesting thinking that Nintendo might finally, hopefully they're realizing that maybe what they were offering just isn't good enough. I mean, we still don't even know about what's happening with Virtual Console. Even if the bad news is everyone's old Virtual Console library can't come over, it still should be one of those things where, yes, but you need to have a solid plan for that as well. Are you going to tie that in with your online system? Is that going to be a separate thing? Is that going to be a games as a service thing? You know, what's it going to be? And Nintendo just, I feel like they are afraid of the backlash, because no matter what they do with Virtual Console, and I think no matter what they do with Virtual Console, it's going to upset people. And no matter what they do with the online system, it's going to upset people. Even if they say voice chat's coming locally to Switch, I just don't see a way that they're going to do it that's going to make people be okay with it. Because like the downfall to voice chat, being on Switch is like they still don't support Bluetooth headsets. Are they ever going to enable that if they put it locally on Switch? And the thing is, they do support headsets now on Switch. You can hook up a headset with a microphone to your Switch and use it. It's fully supported now. So that's like a thing. Oh, maybe they are going to bring it over. But then if you're not holding it in your hand, are you really going to use it? I don't know.
That's the thing, is no port on the Pro
Joy-Con.
Controller even, or on the Joy-Con.
Yeah. So. Oversight. Xbox One did the same thing at launch too. Just a huge oversight to not have that on there.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things about the PlayStation 4 controller, was like as soon as the PlayStation 4 came out, you could just plug a normal headset into it.
Yeah. I don't know why Xbox One wasn't like that at launch. I'm like, really? You guys package headsets in with your console, but I can't plug it into the controller. So what's the point?
Yeah. All right. So what are your final thoughts on this, Daniel?
If they need to take time to make the service better, in some way, then fine by me. Like, I'm fine with delays as long as it means that they'll deliver something better. God knows we waited long enough for Zelda with that. So, but like,
well, we all know it's Nate's fault.
Yeah, it's 100% your fault, Nate. Damn you. No.
Miyamoto called him on the phone. Was like, "Hey, we're working on this console, and we're thinking about putting either like a normal headset port on the controller or on the console itself." And then Nate's like, just put it on the console. No one needs it on the controller.
Yeah, no one needs that.
And then they're
Xbox
like,
doesn't have that.
Yeah.
What do you mean? According to Reggie, no one wants to use those big bulky headsets. And then
yet here all three of us are with our
and then 7 months later, hey, Switch now supports headsets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, like
site Nintendo.
I don't think they know what they should do with it, so they're just kind of like testing the waters, doing something. I don't know.
Reggie's the master of PR spin.
Yeah.
Turns everything into oh yeah, this is obviously a positive. No one wants to wear those giant headphones. They all want little tiny earbuds plugged into their phone.
No, last week on the podcast, I was mentioning an interview with Reggie where before E3 a couple of years ago. He was interviewed about, like, because PlayStation was showing off their PSVR and everything, and they talked to Reggie about Nintendo and VR, and he, gave the same PR answer that we always hear them saying, like, oh, there's nothing interesting with it right now. Hardware can't meet up to the demand for the power that it needs to use it. And then it was Jeff Keighley caught him as he was leaving the PlayStation booth and was like, hey, what was you checking out? And he was like, oh, I was back there taking a look at the PlayStation VR. It's all exciting stuff. And it's like, but you had an interview 2 days ago where you said it wasn't exciting and now you're saying it was. So like, but I think it was just one of those things where he got caught off guard. Like he didn't expect anyone to see him walking out of the PlayStation booth. But
well, it's one of the like Nintendo with VR too. They've always been like we're excited by it. There's videos of Miyamoto checking it out at E3 and stuff. Like they like it. Nintendo's stance has always been it's not convenient enough yet.
Yeah,
it needs to be this thing where you don't have cords and cameras running everywhere, and the tech isn't really there yet. So, like they've even said they've experimented with it with Switch. Trying like the Samsung phone way of doing it.
Yeah, there was the patents that came out before the Switch launched.
Yeah.
Or they're just like, it's not good enough yet. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went a little more in depth than that last week, but I still like to relate it back to the Wii's launch when there was no HDMI support. We were like, why? And they were like, well, most people don't have HDMI support on their TVs, so we want to make. They sort of keep going back to that. What is like what's in the most common household at this point?
Yeah, I wouldn't call Nintendo forward thinking with the way they plan things out. Like,
but they're letting
Switch feels a little bit forward thinking, but there's so much backwards about it too. Like we're forward thinking by not having anything that's standard and providing you, I don't know, like we're putting cartridges on here and we're doing this and we're only giving you 32 gigs of memory and well, like it's so weird. Like it's like they had this amazing idea, but they couldn't escape themselves. Well, like all the negative things are just Nintendo being Nintendo. I don't know. It's just really weird to me. And I love Switch, by the way. It potentially could be my favorite console ever, potentially when it's all said and done. But man, I don't know. Sometimes, man. Sometimes I don't. It's funny because there was a quote. I wish I had it in front of me right now. I can't remember if it was Reggie or Miyamoto. Somebody said something this past year about how they don't pay any attention to what anyone else is doing. And
I would believe it.
That explains a lot at Nintendo.
Yeah, it's like
they have no idea what anyone else is doing. Oh, what's a universal account? What's an online network?
No, I going back to what Daniel was saying about like them being asked why they don't have HDMI on their console, I could see it be like Miyamoto or someone being like, "What's HDMI?" Like, what?
What's an HDMI? We don't have any HD TVs in Japan. What's an HD TV?
All right.
Like, who's gonna be able to afford one of these things 3 years later? Everyone has one.
Yeah, even 4K TV now is getting just as cheap as normal 1080p TVs.
Cheaper sometimes at Walmart.
Yeah. All right. So this next thing, Daniel and I, some of the most popular podcast segments that we've had is when we list stuff. So I have an easy list here that we could talk about with potential Zelda games that could have happened. So I'm wondering, is everybody familiar with all 5 of these that I listed enough to where you could talk about them?
Sure.
All
we
right.
did some videos on these, so
Yeah. All right. So
yeah.
All right. So with The Legend of Zelda, there's been a lot of games that have been canceled or have changed dramatically during production and development, and we have a list of 5 potential Zelda games that could have been. So starting off our list is Wind Waker 2. Now, Nintendo in interviews has mentioned that with Wind Waker, they were working on a sequel. There's even some concept art that we can see of what Toon Link would have looked like as an adult. We eventually got the Wind Waker sequel, Phantom Hourglass, on the DS, so I imagine all of the unused stuff, they just took it and put it on the DS instead of finishing it on the GameCube. And they turned what would have been Wind Waker 2 into Twilight Princess. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Nate? Apparently, it goes, or as Nintendo says, that fan feedback of Wind Waker, no one liked the cartoon art style, so they try to make it realistic.
So it's actually funny. The current president of Nintendo of America was the one who told the current president of Nintendo, Tatsumi Kimishima, was at the time the president of Nintendo of America, and told it literally called him up when he found out they were making Wind Waker 2 and said, nobody in the West likes this. You need to shift back to like a realistic Ocarina of Time thing. And then bam, instantly they switched to Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
And somehow, the amazing thing is they somehow did that and announced Twilight Princess less than 6 months after. Like,
with the most very successful announcement. Like if you watch the videos of when they show the trailer, just like the standing ovation they get is like magic.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the best E3 reveals ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Nintendo really wants to catch people off guard, it's revealing a new Zelda game at the E3 this year because no one expects it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Wind Waker 2 is a very interesting situation.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like they ever got far in development on it. Yes, we know Phantom Hourglass ended up being the sequel. I don't think Phantom Hourglass really used much of the ideas from the OG Wind Waker 2. It was kind of made after the fact because now they had to change it and make it for DS and blah, blah, blah. And they focused a lot on the tap controls, which... Anyways,
yeah.
I'm not a fan of Glass.
I thought Spirit Tracks was one of your favorite Zelda games.
I love Spirit Tracks, but not Phantom Hourglass.
Oh.
The only thing I liked in Phantom Hourglass is that one puzzle where you have to close it because no one could figure that out.
Oh, yeah.
It was a very clever thing that just... It wasn't clicking. Wait, what do you mean I shut my system and put it away? Everyone just figures it out by accident. But yeah, Wind Waker 2 is just... I would have liked to see it happen just because they clearly had a plan, or at least AJ Anuma did. Like, we had a clear-cut plan for what Wind Waker 2 was going to be, and we never really got that, even though we ended up getting a trilogy for it. It probably wasn't what the OG vision was.
Mm-hmm.
Like Spirit Tracks only existed because Phantom Hourglass was the best-selling handheld game ever. So they're like, oh man, we got to do something now with this and get a sequel out, just like they did with Majora's Mask. So I was actually surprised there wasn't a quick turnaround sequel for Twilight Princess after how well that sold. What's really weird too is when they shifted from Wind Waker 2 to Twilight Princess and how fast they announced it. It's kind of like they had to have started on this Twilight Princess almost before Wind Waker was done. Like, this had to be a concept they had before, and then they just said, "Yeah, we're going to do Wind Waker." Because how could they have that much footage ready to go 6 months later?
Yeah, it could have been something where they were experimenting with different ideas, and then Wind Waker 2 looked like it had the most potential, so they started going with that, and then whenever they found out that Americans, I guess, are racist against cartoons...
The reaction to Wind Waker... I almost wonder if they were starting on Wind Waker 2 before Wind Waker originally came out, and maybe that's when it was said. After that, the second E3 showing or whatever of it, and I wonder if that's when Tatsumi picked up the phone and you can't do this.
Yeah.
You see how people react in the U.S. This is not good. Everyone is mad because the last time they saw Zelda was Space World 2000. This is not good.
Yeah.
But when they show that trailer, like you just talk about that quick turnaround or something, they have all this footage. A lot of that stuff is either really, really beta or wasn't even in the game.
Wasn't even in the game.
So part of me wonders how much of it was those like leftovers Wind Waker 2 stuff that they had still, because like so much of that stuff, like probably like 80% of that trailer is not in the game. What is in the game? Bokoblins, or no, they're the Bulbins riding the boars, and Link using horseback combat, and the Bridge of Elden.
Yeah,
picking up cats.
Yeah,
picking up cats.
The boss fight
the best part.
The boss fight with whatever version of Goma that was.
Yeah, totally different. Like we got that in Spirit Tracks. Instead.
Well, people did freak out at the point where he took out his sword and he was hitting people when he was riding the horse, because we've never been able to do that.
Yeah,
I remember that being a big moment. But
primo stuff. That made it into the game.
Because I remember like the most hyped I got was when they were building up, like there was this huge epic open field battle about to go down, and you're just like, what is happening? Are we about to get like the imprisoning war? This is crazy. And then no, we got Hyrule Warriors instead. Many years later. But yeah, I wish we would have saw what the original vision. It's kind of like Wind Waker in general had a lot of content cut from it, that they never re-released because they claimed they used all those ideas in Twilight Princess or other games. But I'm like, really? I don't remember there being a GameCube island in any other game.
Oh yeah.
Well, there was DS Island.
There was a DS Island. There was a DS Island.
So that's probably what they like. Probably changed it to that.
They were inspired, obviously. By
All right, so number 2 on our list, Zelda 3, the original Zelda 3 concept that Daniel and I, we went in depth on in one of the top 5 canceled Zelda games videos that we had, which it's an interview with Miyamoto and I forgot the other guy's name. The person,
that other guy.
He was in
with he has glasses.
Yeah. He was the developer on.
He's Japanese.
What works at Nintendo?
Yeah. No, I don't think it was Nintendo. It was.
No, it wasn't.
It was. Okay. God, do you remember what game it was, Daniel?
No, I don't.
It wasn't.
I'm terrible.
It wasn't.
Yeah, this is the one game on the list. I missed that video you made.
All right. So, anyways, it was like, I want to say it was something akin to Secret of Mana.
Yeah, don't do this 3-party.
Don't do that to me, Game Over Jesse.
So
no, they had a party where you had like a healer and a fighter. Yeah,
you're breaking my heart right now.
Yeah, so
a Secret of Mana Zelda is my dream.
But we did get A Link to the Past instead. And
so
A Link to the Past is like, I love it. Yeah. I shake when I talk about it because I love it so much.
So basically, the idea is, Miyamoto was in an interview with a magazine, and there was another, I guess you could say, famous developer that was also being interviewed about their game, and they were going back and forth talking about the games they were working on. Nintendo, this was about, I would say, maybe a year before the game released, and Miyamoto was saying stuff, like he was describing a completely different game than what A Link to the Past was. He was saying there is a 3-party system in the game, like an elf, a fairy type, and something else. And then he was saying that he wanted it to be more RPG focused, but sort of in the style of the original Zelda. So like moving away from the 2D Zelda 2 style back to traditional 2D Zelda styles.
Sure. Yep.
And he said that the game was complete, ready to go. They just didn't want to release it yet because there was another big game about to launch. And he didn't feel like if he released the game, they would end up like hurting each other. So he was going to wait.
Because they have to compete with each other instead.
Yeah. So Miyamoto, yes. So Miyamoto was, he basically waited and 6 months, 8 months, a year, however long it was, to release the game from when it was done. But during that time that they waited, they changed what it was going to be into a completely different game. Like maybe the dungeon designs and story elements stayed similar, but instead of being like a 3-player game where it's like a fairy or whatever, an elf, which we kind of still got in Ocarina of Time. Like there was the fairy that was your companion, and then Link is the elf character, and then there was the third character, and you're supposed to be able to switch between all three of them. Each of them have their own unique abilities and stuff. It was completely like very, very different from what you would imagine a Zelda game would be. But that was basically the concept for it, was that it was going to be a 3-player game. And yeah, like aside from Triforce Heroes, we haven't really seen a 3-player Zelda game. So what are your thoughts on that? You said that your favorite game would be like a Secret of Mana crossover style Zelda game. You saying that
if they could somehow mash Breath of the Wild with Secret of Mana, I would die and go to heaven right now. I don't know how they would do that.
Then you would miss the game.
There's so much. I know. There's so much like different elements between those games that I don't even know how you would mix it. But this is why I'm not a game designer. I don't have to worry about that. I could just be a fanboy and dream, because those are my 2 favorite games of all time. And Secret of Mana was my favorite game of all time up until Breath of the Wild. So I always felt like Secret of Mana to me was the Zelda game I never got. So to even have a rumor out there that makes it sound like A Link to the Past could have been Secret of Mana, just like get out of here with that. Get out of here with that. Like now I'm glad that Star Fox 2 came out in the classic instead of this unreleased version of Zelda, because oh man, I'm not saying it would have been better than Secret of Mana. It probably wasn't, since up at that point they only had the 2 Zelda games and both of them were really limited in their own ways. So whatever they were doing might have also been limited at the time. But yeah, man,
like it's easy to kind of romanticize what could have been though, but like they did change it for a reason.
Well, yeah, and what we got
so,
is one of the best Zelda games that ever come out. So,
and are like often regarded as one of just the best games that have ever come out.
It's like every time any place makes the top 100 games of all time, it's always on there.
Yeah, like I feel like if we hadn't got A Link to the Past as it was, also like that game sets a lot of standards for the franchise, you know. So like who knows it? Like if we hadn't got A Link to the Past, what Ocarina of Time would have been? And
Ocarina of Time was just a 3D A Link to the Past.
Pretty much. There's a reason I love them both so much. So like, clearly there was a game that worked for me, and then they did it again, and it worked for me again. So
right.
Yeah.
Oh man.
All right, so I was trying to find. I was.
You're doing something over there. I don't know what you're doing.
I was trying to find that interview to see who the other director was, but it was like there were 2 game developers, Miyamoto and the other guy, and then they were both being interviewed at the same time. I think it was from Square.
Yeah. Can you imagine being interviewed and you sit down for the interview and then Miyamoto sits beside you to talk about the next Zelda game, and you're like, nothing I say.
Well, wouldn't that depend if it was like the head guy of Final Fantasy or something? He'd have just as much clout back then.
Okay, true. But if it was a guy just talking about whatever RPG that came out at that time, like
I'm just a random developer.
I'd be sweating. I'm like, oh god, here's Miyamoto, and he's here to talk about Zelda. Nothing I say is good. Like all the headlines are gonna be whatever he says, not what about what I say.
Yeah.
And that's back in Miyamoto's heyday. Like everyone thinks he's a legend now. Back then, like they viewed him as the savior, specific in the development community.
Because at that point, he Donkey Kong on the arcade, and then Mario Bros, Mario 3, Metroid. You know, you got he didn't really do much with Metroid. I think he's often credited for it.
He was part of. Yeah, he didn't really.
But you know, he's got Zelda and Mario to his name, so.
I mean, what more did you need? I mean,
pretty big.
Did you need anything else?
Yeah.
Back then, no,
exactly.
Man. Oh, in the last 5 years, I just founded 2 of the biggest franchises that ever existed. Have a good day.
All right, so
maybe the only other person would maybe the creator of Tetris. They would have had
comes and sits down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I wasn't able to find the website.
It doesn't exist. You're making it up.
No, we used the website. You can see it in the video that we made.
Okay. Gotta go watch the video now.
You're gonna have to link me to the video after.
So
now I'm very curious.
When you land on the Jesse's channel, it's like one of the featured videos on the front, I think.
So our third Zelda game, and I'll occasionally be looking this up for the people that are watching to try to find it while we talk about some of the other Zelda games. But the third Zelda game that we could have gotten was a canceled third game for the Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages games called, it was originally going to be 3 games, Mystical Seeds of Courage, Power, Wisdom, and I think it was Courage was the one that was ended up being canceled, and then they put elements of it into the other 2 Zelda games that they did release. And funnily enough, it started as another project that ended up being, I guess, canceled as well, because Capcom began working on a remake of the original Zelda for the Game Boy or Game Boy Colors. And while they were like halfway done with it, Nintendo said something along the lines of, hey, why don't you make something new and original in the Zelda series instead of just a remake? So they ended up changing what they had to one of the Oracle games, which is, I was seeing comparisons of, like, if you compare some of the bosses, some of the layouts of the overworld, it looks very similar to the original Zelda game. So they didn't just get rid of everything that they were trying to remake. They incorporated it into one of the Oracle games that we do have. But in the same way that the 2 Oracle games linked together to give you a special ending, you were supposed to be able to link all 3 of these together, but Nintendo and Capcom thought it was too much to do on the system itself, because it was the original Game Boy Color, very limited in what it can do. So basically, I would say they were a little bit ahead of their time with this, and I guess the concept of creating 3 different Zelda games, trying to make them all feel unique and not like, oh, this feels exactly like this other game. So
well, Pokemon gets away with it, so
yeah, it's like, but this game has different Pokemon though. It's like, yeah, but that's like the only thing that changes is like.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's something. Oracle and Seasons and Ages at least had some very different stuff between the 2 games.
Yeah,
surprisingly so.
So one of them was supposed to be focused on combat, and the other was supposed to be focused on dungeon design and puzzles and stuff, which is what makes them feel different from each other. And I guess the third was supposed to be a mix of both. So elements from it got incorporated into the other 2 games, and they changed the titles to Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, instead of the Mystical Seeds of whatever. So
the Mystical Seeds of Tirnanog.
Yeah, so what are you, Daniel, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you would you have preferred the 3 separate games, or are you satisfied with just the 2 that we got?
Well, as has been mentioned, the Oracle games are like the 2 Zelda games that I haven't played. So, but I feel like, you know, more games are better. Is that bad of me to say? Like, if we got 3 games instead of 2, like, yeah, that'd be great. But like, I don't know how they could have done it, because like, you have to get 2 passwords, basically, and then put them in, or
yeah, it would have been a password system.
Like it's yeah, so they would have to do, who knows what they would have had to do instead, like give you half the password at the end of one game and then half of it on the other game, and then when you get the third game. But like, part of the thing about the Oracle games is you could do them in either order, right? It doesn't matter which one you play first, and then
you just have to get to the end.
So really quick, to go back to Zelda 3, here's a quick quote from Miyamoto. He says, "Ever since I started making the first game in the Zelda series, I've been saying that the third Zelda will feature a party, one that consists of the protagonist, who's a mix between elf and a fighter, a magic user, and a girl. The fairy that appeared in Adventure of Link was actually a party member designed for Zelda 3.
Oh, so Secret of Mana.
A girl who looked, and then he goes on, a girl who looked a little like a fairy and whose role consisted of reconnaissance. Yeah. Okay. Like the characters in action games that don't engage enemies in combat, but rather go and scout out the surroundings and return to you safely. It's also fun when action-adventure games let you choose who to send out. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking I'd like to do in Zelda 3. I've never been too particular about the story and This isn't obvious. I've never been too particular about the story in games I've made in conjunction with Earthbound creator Shigesata Itoi. So that was who it was. Earthbound, not Secret of Mana. Sorry. That's who was being interviewed beside him. He says, the stories of Mario and Zelda titles have always been supplemental to the actual gameplay. Action games only have stories attached to make the experience more interesting. Itoi, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, Itoi, so I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it right, is the one that writes the story, and I just help out a bit. We were more or less finished already. Now we just have to wait until release. But the factories won't make any copies for us. They have to make a ton of copies for Dragon Quest. I'd like to wait until it comes out before releasing the game. Once Dragon Quest fever sets in, this year is done for. Curiously, staggering the releases affects the demand for the Super Nintendo. The game's...
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, while he was waiting on Dragon Quest to release for the system, they ended up changing it into a one-character game, and basically completely different. Instead of sending out any one of your 3 party members to like scout out while the other 2 fight.
Sounds a little tactical.
Yeah, so very, very different. But it is...
Yeah, what?
It is interesting that he was saying that the concept was something that he was thinking of ever since the very first Zelda.
It's also interesting when he says, like, yeah, but we can't get a manufacturer to make it because they're making Dragon Quest. What?
It's like you own the factories.
Yeah, like
it's your carts.
Isn't it your carts? And like you could just be like, yeah, make this game instead right now. We own this property.
Yeah, screw Dragon Quest.
We don't own Dragon Quest. Why are we waiting on Dragon Quest? Oh,
it could have just been an excuse,
yeah.
Like. Just,
but I think that the delay was good though, because what we got with Link to the Past was amazing.
Still one of those. How different would the Zelda series be today if instead of Link to the Past we got this co-op, 3-player thing?
Yeah, there's another thing that it doesn't mention it in this, but there was a separate interview where he was talking about whether or not the game was in Zelda 3, whether or not it was being developed for the Famicom or this upcoming Super Famicom. So a lot of the stuff could have began to play on the NES, but then they changed it to work on the more powerful console. So yeah, there's a lot of different things there. But going back to, I guess we can go to the 4th game since we already discussed Mystical Seed of Courage. So I'm sure a lot of people have been familiar with this. This is probably the newest game that has come out of, I guess...
Screenshots!
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Just a month or 2 ago, a employee from Ubisoft, who I believe worked on the Mario Rabbids crossover, released some artwork that he had to show for a Game Boy Advanced remake of The Wind Waker. And it looked pretty darn cool. So... Daniel and I, we talked about this at length in one of our videos. So, Nate, what are your thoughts on this? I'm sure you've seen the screenshots.
Yeah,
or the screenshot.
Well, and we saw it because people were asking him, how did they start talking to Nintendo to come up with this Mario plus Rabbids idea? And one of those says, well, actually, we originally pitched this thing to Nintendo with Wind Waker way back when, and they loved it, but they said no.
This is a great idea.
Whatever. Well, it's fine. Maybe they thought it was going to be too competitive with other games at the time. But it's obviously something that never had a ton of work put into it. Who knows if they even had like a working game? If it wasn't, maybe it was just some art assets they threw together to come up with a concept to be like, look, we think we can do this on GBA. Let us do it. Or whatever, and they didn't. But I think I don't know. Just thinking about that, that would have predated it coming out. Well, yeah, that would have because DS didn't come to 2005. I want to say.
Yeah, this came out before, or they were working on this before Minish Cap came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's part
I
of why they
got a lot of
canceled it.
Minish Cap vibes when I looked at it too. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
because Wind Waker and Minish Cap kind of have that similar artistic style.
Yeah.
I don't. It just looked like really cool. Like I'm all for trying to do something zany like that, where you're taking this 3D Zelda game and making it like this 2D experience on this platform. I think that's just a really neat thing. I don't know how many fans would have bought into it, but it can work with Zelda because Zelda is also a 2D top-down franchise.
Yeah, the interesting for me is that the Game Boy Advance, I believe, is the only console that Nintendo didn't create their own original Zelda game for, because Capcom made the Game Boy Advance Zelda game, Minish Cap. So do you think the reason that they turned down Ubisoft was because they already had a deal set in with Capcom that's like, hey, you're the only second or third party company that's allowed to work with us on Zelda, and it was like already a deal or in the contract with Capcom that they couldn't get someone else to do it?
I don't know if there was like an exclusivity contract there with Capcom, because I think, especially when you're talking about Zelda, it's kind of one of those franchises where anyone who, like, if Nintendo offers Platinum to work on it, I doubt that they're going to be like, okay, we'll make it for the only company that can make Zelda games.
Yeah. Like,
that's too big of a franchise for them to even make that demand of Nintendo. So I think it was more so, I mean, you got to think of the timing, you had DS coming out in 2005. You had Wind Waker release, in 2003. They just announced Twilight Princess in 2004. So somewhere in that time frame is when this idea was pitched to them. And it's kind of like, well, we're hyping up this new Zelda game, and we have a brand new platform coming out in 2 years. So a GBA version doesn't really make sense right now in that small window they have. Now, you could argue, well, maybe it would make sense on DS, but then at that point, you can arguably port Wind Waker to DS in some form.
Yeah. So, moving on to the fifth and final Zelda game, Zelda Gaiden, the beta, or basically Zelda Gaiden was to Majora's Mask what Ura was to Ocarina of Time, which really doesn't make too much sense to me because they canceled the Ura expansion because the 64 disc drive wasn't selling well. So their answer to that was to start production of a new Zelda game that took advantage of it. So we're talking about Zelda Gaiden now, Nate.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically, it's essentially what I would call, I just said that to the other people watching, but to get you up to speed, I look at it as essentially what Ura was to Ocarina of Time was almost what Gaiden could have been, or Gaiden could have been to Majora's Mask. And the crazy thing is, they went into development of it with the 64 disc drive in mind. But the Ura expansion for Ocarina of Time was canceled because it didn't sell well. So it's like, if the last one didn't sell well and it had to be canceled because the hardware that was meant to use it didn't sell well, why would you start a new project to take advantage of that hardware? Like, maybe they were hoping that sales would end up going on so that they could release it, but it was essentially what Majora's Mask was, except it was going to have a full 7-day cycle, 1 week, as opposed to just 3 days. Obviously, the disk drive failed, and within the development time, they pulled it back from the disk drive to work solely on the hardware that we had, but because of that, there were certain aspects of it that wouldn't run on the base hardware, so that is why it also incorporates the expansion pack, so you could have more RAM to play. So that's basically what it was. I don't really know if there was meant to be more dungeons involved with it. I just know that I guess the side quests and some of the other stuff would have been a bit more complicated, as opposed to tying into a 3-day schedule. Now there's a 7-day schedule. So there's also a few glitches that you can do in the game to see what the moon would have looked like on like day 1. Or because day 1, day 2, and day 3 that we get in Majora's Mask is essentially day 5, day 6, and day 7 of what Gaiden would have been. So when you started out on day 1, the moon would have been like so far away that you wouldn't even be able to see that it had a face until you're 3 or 4 days in and you look up and you're like, oh, the moon's getting bigger and it has a face. what the heck is going on? So that's, I think it would have been interesting. Obviously, more Zelda.
Probably at this point, I don't think it had a face at this point though, because if you look at early Majora's Mask screens, it didn't have a face in earlier development. So who knows, like when they added that terrifying detail, like, but yeah, I think at that point in development, it probably didn't have a face. But even still, the moon getting closer and closer is already kind of a terrifying prospect. So
yeah, I wonder if it would have been something that, like, because when you start out, I think it's the Happy Mask salesman tells you that you have 3 days to get the mask back for him. So it would have been interesting if, instead of him telling you that, he just says, hey, get this mask back for me. And then you're stuck in that 7 days without knowing the moon's getting closer and closer until you realize on the last day, it's like, hey, the moon's taking up the entire sky. What's going on here?
Yeah.
So, like, it would have been interesting if it was left for the player to figure out for themselves, or once you return to the Happy Mask salesman, then he tells you. So...
Yeah, the moon thing would have been more dramatic if it was over 7 days too, because it basically starts out where it looks like it's almost hitting the ground anyways.
Yeah, gravity would have been sucking you up.
Like, the only way it got more dramatic is because of the cutscene at the end. Otherwise, it's kind of like, yeah, okay. I mean, the moon looks a little bit bigger than it did 12 hours ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things is also that the moon is, like, it's so big, it's visible from anywhere in the game. So, I mean, if they had a slower build to that, you know, like, that just, yeah, it would really add to that build up. I mean, as it is, you already have to kind of discover, like, when you first walk out into Clocktown for the very first time, the first thing that happens isn't that they look up at the moon and they're like, whoa, it's getting bigger.
No, the dog attacks you.
Save.
That's the first thing.
That's the first thing
that dang dog.
And everyone's racist to DQ scrubs. But you know, like, it's not till you get to the observatory and then that you, unless you just look up for some reason, but until that point, then it's like, whoa, that moon is really close. Which is kind of a moment I think we take for granted at this point. You know, we kind of forget that, like, oh yeah, what was the first time you discovered that? Unless you watched that whole beginning cutscene before starting your save file, you wouldn't really know.
The real life advertising before the game came out.
Or there's that. Yeah. I knew what the first time I played because of word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get it, like, at release. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen sort of a more dramatic build to that, because yeah, it is, like, already really close.
Yeah, and Majora's Mask. Sorry, I was going to say Majora's Mask is already thought of. The reason a lot of people like Majora's Mask isn't really the dungeons, because there's only like 4 of them. It's because the huge focus on the side quests and the character interactions, and all of that is boiled down to 3 days. So potentially,
believability of the world.
Yeah, so potentially we could have had over twice as many storylines, side stories, and character interactions.
Yeah, I can see a lot more happening outside of Clocktown too.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I always say that Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess are really like the opposites of each other, and that Majora's Mask, what's brilliant about it is its world building and its NPCs and its world. It's a very rich, living world. And Twilight Princess has a much larger world, but it's not as rich. And really, what's brilliant about Twilight Princess is its dungeons and its really great level design.
Yeah.
But
well,
in that way,
in Twilight Princess, the moment you walk into the clock town and you realize most of these people are fake and you can't even interact with them. It's kind of like, how did we go from clock town to this?
Yeah, exactly.
How?
Like,
there's no one worth talking to in Castle Town. Hi. Like, okay, hi. Nothing? No quest? No,
yeah.
What's the point of talking to you again?
All right.
Everyone in Kakariko is dead, and no one in Castletown is worth talking to, and except for Telma.
2D backgrounds.
Yeah, exactly. And then Ordon Village, once you're done there, you never go back to it for any good reason except for grabbing some heart pieces. So
yeah,
I would just love this original vision from Majora's Mask of the 7 days. I mean, this is one of those things you hear about, and it's just like, just like with the Zelda 3 thing, like it kind of sucks that we're never really going to see what that original vision was.
Yeah, I bet Miyamoto sits down at least once a year to play through some of these canceled Zelda games.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
he's too busy playing Pikmin 4. That's been done.
Give me Pikmin.
He has, like, I have no doubt in my mind that he has the fabled legendary Ura expansion on a working 64 disk drive just tucked away in his closet. That's like, this is...
He probably thinks no one cares.
He probably doesn't even have it on that. You got to remember, he's at the forefront. He just gets to play it straight on his PC.
Oh, yeah.
No problem.
That's true. But, you know, like, this is not to say we don't love Majora's Mask, folks. It's one of my favorite games. I did an awesome video on Nate's channel about it. You should go watch it.
Majora's Mask is an amazing game.
Yeah.
It's so good. But,
all right, so to end this, which of these 5 games, I'll recap them here in a second, which of these 5 games would you have liked the most? At number 1, we had Wind Waker 2, not Phantom Hourglass for the people watching. That's a different concept. Yep. We have Zelda 3, which isn't A Link to the Past. Completely different. We have Mystical Seed of Courage, I believe, was the one that was canceled. Mystical Seed of Power and Wisdom got turned into Ages of Seasons, or Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. Then we have the Ubisoft Wind Waker Game Boy Advance remake. And then at number 5, as we just covered, Zelda Gaiden, which was Majora's Mask, but more. So, yeah, I would go... For me, it would be a tie between Wind Waker 2 and Zelda Gaiden, because playing through a follow-up story to Wind Waker as an adult Link, like maybe Hyrule gets unflooded or something happens, who knows what the concept was. So yeah, like I would have loved to see that. There's probably a lot of the dungeon concepts in Wind Waker 2 that they reused for Twilight Princess. They just retextured it to make it look realistic as opposed to cartoony, so you probably could have seen a lot of the same puzzle designs and challenges from those. So yeah, mine would be Wind Waker 2 or Zelda Gaiden. What about you, Nate? Which of these 5 would you have rather played?
Survey says 2, Secret of Mana.
Oh.
Zelda edition.
All right. And you, Daniel?
I'm going to go with Wind Waker 2, just because I really love Wind Waker. And like I was giving Holly a hard time when we had her on for when she was saying that she didn't like Wind Waker when it first came out. Yeah. I was like, no, it's so good. It's and yeah, I'd like to see kind of like, we know what happened with him now, you know, with that Link. You know, they went off, they did Phantom Hourglass, which may or may not be a dream, and then they, you know, founded New Hyrule for laid the groundwork to Spirit Tracks. But you know, like, that Link is a really different Link than we've ever seen otherwise. That incarnation of Link in particular, and he's a character that has he has a more robust personality than any other Link that has come before or even after, I think. Like, God bless Breath of the Wild, but that Link is just not as expressive, and he doesn't have as full a character, in my opinion. Partly due to his amnesia, partly
yeah, I thought that was weird.
But,
like they said that one of the things that they liked most, or one of the things Nintendo liked most about Wind Waker, was that Link had so many expressions. Like, he could his eyes could pop open really big, he could change his mouth into weird shapes to show different emotions. The same for Skyward Sword. Like, in one of the dungeons, when you're walking down to it, the heat from it, you can see it like blowing Link's hat back, and he tries to cover his face from the heat and everything. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff there in the cartoony or artsy styled Zelda games that was missing from Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, it seemed like they just wanted him to be as emotionless as possible.
Yeah, he's kind of like a plank of wood that you just paint your face on. But yeah, I really like that character, that version of Link. And I feel like I would like to see more with him, and it would be cool to see more of Submerged Hyrule, because like we get to see a little bit. We get to see Hyrule Castle, and then the path to Ganon's Tower, and then that's it. But you see like so much more of that there is, like, landscape, and it makes you wonder. Like, that was one of the things I was the most curious about when I played Wind Waker before. Yeah, was like, what else is out there? You know, I want to see all this ruined Hyrule. You know, and yeah, it would have been really cool to maybe to explore that some more. Who knows what? But yeah, Wind Waker 2 would have been really cool. I think. Like I do really enjoy Twilight Princess for what it is. Like some of the best dungeon designs, some of the coolest items in a Zelda game. Even if some of them are heavily underused. But yeah, it would have been cool to see. The other games, I think, kind of all, other than the third Oracle game, the other ones kind of became other things anyways. So yeah.
All right. So if you guys have about 10 more minutes, we can quickly try to get through the questions.
Yes, let's.
All right. So I'm going to do a different intro for the mailbag. And then I will introduce everyone again, and we can start going through the questions. Do you have the questions up, Nate?
Yep.
All right. What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or Game Over Jesse, as some of you all may know me. And as always, I am here with Daniel, my faithful co-host. Say hi, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
All right. And for the first time joining on the mailbag, I believe for the first time, is Nate. He's been here for the rest of the podcast, but this is the first time he's been here for the mailbag. So say hi, Nate. Where could people find you and
hi, Nate.
Buy you milkshakes?
Say, that's my joke name. I gotta patent that.
Yeah, so I'm Nathaniel Rumpeljans. Most people just call me Nate. I don't know why I always use my full name. It's just kind of been my thing. I am the content creator, YouTuber at Nintendo Prime. Just type in Nintendo Prime anywhere. It's going to be me. There's a website for it. I used to do some other Zelda stuff at some point in my life. I don't know. I don't care about that anymore. It's all about
Nintendo Prime.
Nintendo Prime or
Zelda
MPP
Prime.
Or NPM or whatever it ends up getting rebranded
I'm
to.
a big fan of Ninty.
Ninty
Prime.
Ninty Prime.
Prime.
Yes.
Hey, that's our Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So this is our Zelda mailbag, but sometimes we get questions outside of the world of Zelda, so feel free to ask questions about Nintendo, Zelda, Mario, Metroid, PlayStation, Xbox, relationship advice from Daniel. So
not just relationship advice, just general life advice.
Yes. That's actually on the old podcast we had my friend Simon. He's like going to school to study like different stuff, and some of his favorite stuff was like asking people to send in questions for like relationship advice or stuff like that. So then it would be like Amanda who's the news video host for Zelda Universe, and me, and then we would like every question we would answer would be about Zelda, but then like it would come to him answering a question and it would be someone's like, hey, this girl doesn't like me. No, it was great to have the variety because it was off topic. But anyways, if you have a question, please comment them below. Sometimes we get too many questions and we can't get to all the questions. So what do we do? What do they do if they can't get their question read?
You should become a Patreon subscriber because
there's that plug there.
Yeah, there it is. If you're a patron, your questions take priority because we love you.
Yes, and this week we only have one question from a Patreon subscriber, but yes, head over to patreon.com/GameOverJesse if you want your question to take priority, and there's also a lot of other good stuff there. So, our first question comes from Patreon subscriber The One.
Wait, which one? The One.
Yes. He actually has his own Zelda YouTube channel that I think he's worked on videos with.
Oh, really? Which one?
With McIntyre, RMFH, and...
I know, The One.
Yeah. So, his question, would you like the next Zelda game to take place in Hyrule or in a different land/world? I would say the only 3D Zelda game that has taken place outside of Hyrule was Majora's Mask, which took place in Termina. Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild all took place in Hyrule. Some of those games you could travel to other locations, like you could go to the Silent Realm or whatever it was called in Skyward Sword, but that was essentially just like a different textures put on Hyrule.
Not even just different lighting.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. More bloom effect.
I could be wrong on this, but I think the Spirit Temple dungeon in Twilight Princess takes place in the Sacred Realm. Because
or the Witch Temple of Time? That dungeon?
Yeah, the Temple of Time, because it's a gateway to the Sacred Realm. And you have to travel through that glass painting or whatever that Navi flies through in Ocarina of Time at the end. I think it's the same one. So, like, I think that is essentially, like, the gateway through to the Sacred Realm, but I don't know. Like, I just know the Temple of Time is supposed to be the gateway to the Sacred Realm. And
unconfirmed speculation.
Yes. Is that not what Ocarina of Time says?
Yes.
Like Ocarina of Time says it's the gateway. Yeah. But we don't know if the dungeon actually takes place. But in my head canon, I like to think that it does. So, basically, I would like to see a return to Termina. I've said this 100,000 times. We've seen what if we take Ocarina of Time's version of Hyrule, and then we go to Twilight Princess version of Hyrule, we can see what Hyrule looks like running on a much more powerful console and having the world a lot bigger than it is on the Nintendo 64. Then we can jump to Breath of the Wild, which is Hyrule on an even larger scale, and we can see what it looks like after so many thousands of years have passed. So even if we took the Twilight Princess or the Breath of the Wild approach to Termina, what would it look like on the scale of Hyrule from Twilight Princess or Breath of the Wild? But then not only is it a much larger version of Termina, but you also have a lot of stuff that could have happened between the time. So like a few hundred years later or a few thousand years later, just to revisit it, to see what it looks like completely different. Like if they had another go at Twilight Princess and weren't limited to, not Twilight Princess, another go at Termina, but they aren't limited to the smaller world size that the Nintendo 64 is limited to. So basically Termina on the scale of Breath of the Wild. It doesn't even need to be, like, it could be half the size of Hyrule from Breath of the Wild, and that would still be a huge version of Termina. So that's my thoughts, and I would want it to be a lively Termina, similar to what it was like in Majora's Mask, where all the NPCs had a set place that they would be at a specific time, all of the side quests. I wouldn't want it to be like, oh, there's like 100 different towns you can go to, but 99 of them are all in ruins. So, like, that's what Breath of the Wild gave us. Like, in Hyrule Field, you come across so many buildings or monuments and stuff that's all just completely destroyed. And then it shows the cutscenes of what the villages and towns looked like when they were fully restored a long time ago. And it's like, why can't we visit that? Like, why does it have to be all burnt down? So that's what I would like to see. What about you?
Which one?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nate. You're the guest.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I don't know how many people remember, because we haven't really had a game take place, but like way back in the day, like Link wasn't from Hyrule. He came from surrounding territories that we've just never visited. This is according to the manuals and all that stuff.
For what, Zelda 1?
Yeah, for like Zelda 1.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to name the lands just because I can't remember off the top of my head, because it's just not something people talk about ever. But like at Breath of the Wild, because I want a quick turnaround game to Breath of the Wild. So in Breath of the Wild, you kind of get to the edge of Hyrule and there's more out there. They didn't do what I thought they would do, which is like surround it with water and just be done with it. They made it very obvious there's other land out there with animals and other things happening. So I like to think that other land is actually the adjacent lands that have been canon forever that we've never got to visit. So I would like the next game to take place there. Now, that's no diss on Hyrule. That's just because I want a quick turnaround game. If it's not a quick turnaround game, they obviously could go back to Hyrule and do something. But I feel like I want to see them with their current creativity and take it to a new land where they kind of break free of any perceived restrictions that Hyrule might provide right now. And just open it up to even like a new threat, right? Like the threat still feels like, even in like the DLC, it's like, okay, there's like the new threat or whatever, but not really. The threat is still, Calamity Ganon and making sure that never happens again, and blah blah blah. So it's kind of like going to a new area kind of also gives them an excuse to bring in a new threat. That doesn't mean we haven't had other threats in Hyrule. I know, guys. But it's still all been based around Ganon and eventually bringing him.
Yeah. Ganon gave Zant his power, so...
Yeah.
The rule... Okay, well, I have a few points. The rule is, if it's this Link's first adventure, the enemy is Ganon. If it's this Link's second adventure and he's somewhere else, then it's with something else. Yeah. But I think Twilight Princess says... It talks about... I think Ordana Province, or the Ordon Province, is actually separate from Hyrule. I think it's actually technically not part of Hyrule in that game. And because I think at the beginning of the game, Russell, that's his name, I hope, asked Link, have you ever been to Hyrule? And he's like, blank stare, because he's Link. And he's like, no, you haven't. Okay. Well, you're going to go, buddy. Yeah, and then he kind of does for a different reason. But, yeah, so I think that technically that's the closest we've gotten to sort of exploring outside of Hyrule, and that's only maybe kinda. But yeah, I'd like to see more outside of Hyrule, just because, you know, universe building, as I said before when we were talking about Metroid, more universe building is good. We know there's more than just Hyrule because we see islands off in the distance, we see other land off in the distance of Breath of the Wild, and in other games too. In Twilight Princess, you can see unexplorable areas that you can't get to, that I really want to. But I'm not the boundary break guy, so I can't. Overall, I think if they announced the next Zelda game and it was in Hyrule, I wouldn't be disappointed because when it comes to geography, it's not going to be the same enough.
Yeah, it could be Hyrule, but it would look completely different.
It won't really be the same Hyrule. Like, you know, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword, they all take place in Hyrule, but they're not the same map. Yeah. So, you know, if it's in Hyrule, I won't complain. If it's not, that's awesome too. I'm game for it to not be, but I won't be disappointed either way. And that's my bet.
All right. Nate isn't with us for the moment, so we will head to...
He's no longer with us?
He blends in with the green screen. It's actually him and John Cena both on camera.
Oh, this makes sense. Actually, I'm not gonna lie. For some reason, Skype gave up on me some time ago, so I can't see you guys.
Oh, we can see you.
But I know you can see me because I keep checking the live streams.
All right. So Edible Incredible, who has a great YouTube channel,
he does,
says, what specific aspects from Breath of the Wild will Nintendo be keeping in the next big Zelda game?
The big open world.
Yeah.
They've already said that. They're like, yeah, I think we'll do that again. So
I would say the paraglider, but
please, I love it.
We get the paraglider in this game as soon as we get off the Great Plateau. That's actually what we use to get off the Great Plateau. I would like it if
jetpack.
Jetpack. Yeah. Okay, no, if you had to take, like, not put it in the middle of the game or late in the game, but like maybe after the third dungeon. So like if you look at Ocarina of Time, you've discovered most of Hyrule by the time you complete the third dungeon. You go to Kakiri Forest, Lost Woods, Goron City, Zora River, Zora Domain, Hyrule Field, Lon Lon Ranch, Kakariko Village, Death Mountain, Hyrule Castle. The only place that you don't really go to is the desert, Gerudo Valley, which you can go to, you just can't really get into it. So like there's 10-ish dungeons in that game off the top of my head, and by the time you finish 3 dungeons, you've already discovered like 90% of the world. So I would like it if it was similar to that, to where after you complete 3 dungeons, then you're given like, oh, this is Zelda's cloth or whatever from Skyward Sword that Link had to use, which is what they showed it to be originally in Breath of the Wild before they changed it to the paraglider. So if it was something,
makes so much more sense though.
Yeah,
like using it as a big cloth, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But I would want it something like that. Like that's one thing that I can't imagine a Zelda game doing unless it's like a 2D Zelda game. But like I can't see going back to just traveling on foot, especially.
Yeah.
It's like someone giving you, like, I don't know, like they just give you like a $10 million car, and then a year later they're
take
like,
the bus.
yeah, like a year later they're just like, here's a bus ticket. So like it,
yeah,
because like when
they
you
gotta do it upwards, not backwards.
yeah, when you think of Breath of the Wild, you think of paragliding essentially, which is
and
something
climbing.
which is something you never would have thought of before this. So that's some of the stuff that I think should be carried over.
Yep.
And then they also have the cut content, the long shot or hook shot.
Yes.
So there's
and also this could be a great opportunity to revisit Loft Wings. That would be cool. It's not really from Breath of the Wild, but like it's more like an improvement of the paraglider. The paraglider you can just sort of glide, right? But with the Loft Wing, you can gain momentum. You can, it's really limited what you could do with them in Skyward Sword. But if you brought that mechanic into Breath of the Wild's world, like a world that size, it could open up so many more possibilities. So
Link could just jump on the back of Rivali and just ride him around.
I don't think we would like that.
Yeah. All right. So our next question comes from a hidden figure. That says, question: would you prefer the next Zelda game to take place in Hyrule once again, another world from a previous Zelda or Nintendo game, or a new location? I would prefer a new location, especially after Breath of the Wild. Well, Mr. Hidden Figure, we just answered this a minute ago, so
there you go. 2 for 1.
Good job. All right. So
2 questions for the price of 1.
Gustavo, who I believe used to be a Patreon member, asks, what was the first game you guys played, and what system was it? The first game that I remember playing is A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. So, yeah. What about you, Daniel?
I have... Okay, well, it's actually kind of a tie between 2. I don't know which one was first, but my earliest childhood memories are A Link to the Past and Super Mario World. I don't know which one I played first. They're probably about the same time. But yeah, those 2 games, those are my Wii memories. First games I ever played. And I still come back to them now because that's how well they hold up.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, Super Nintendo, obviously. But
I wonder if Nate will get back before the last question. All right. Jonathan Drews asks,
no longer with us.
What are the odds that Nintendo creates new 2D Mario and Zelda games for the Switch? I'm going to say 102% chance.
Ooh, I'm going to lowball it and say 98.4%.
Yeah. I think the next 2D Zelda game will be releasing sometime this year or next year. So.
Yeah, yep. That sounds about right. And where there is 3D Mario, there is usually also 2D Mario, with the exception of the N64, I think. And then before that, it didn't happen because there was no 3D Mario.
As great as 3D Mario games are reviewed, like Super Mario Galaxy 2, Mario Odyssey are 2 of the highest rated games. Even though the 2D Mario games don't get rated nearly as high, they always outsell the 3D games. So
they make bank.
Nintendo, like, when they release a 2D Zelda game, it's just like money flowing into their pockets.
And they're fun. Like, I really enjoy both. Like, I like my 3D Mario, but I really love 2D Mario as well. But the only thing is, like, with Super Mario Maker, that one's like a limitless pool of opportunity. I don't know what else they could do now with 2D Mario. Like that, like they put it in our hands. We probably already exhausted all the ideas. So.
Nate, we need your help. Is there going to be? Hurry, really quick. Is there going to be another 2D Mario game or another 2D Zelda game on the Switch?
What are the odds?
I said there's 110 or 104% chance.
You said 102%.
Okay, 102.
Stick to your story.
Would a new Mario Maker count?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because they come with pre-built 2D stages.
Okay. Well then, yes, absolutely, because there's going to be a new Mario Maker. I'm pretty sure.
All right. Really quickly, Gustavo wants to know, what was your first game you ever played?
And what system was it on?
We're doing a speed round.
Yeah, Punch-Out.
Punch-Out.
NES.
Oh, okay.
Edible Incredible wants to know what specific aspects from Breath of the Wild will Nintendo be keeping for their next big Zelda game?
Open world, exploration, climbing, maybe crafting.
See, I said open world. Jesse said paragliding.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of part of the exploration. So maybe.
Yeah.
But I said I want the paraglider. Instead of getting it towards the beginning of the game, I want it to be like after the third dungeon. That way,
you're not a jetpack.
Yeah, that's what Daniel said. He said jetpack.
Jetpack.
They're borrowing it from Mario Sunshine. It's all good.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's like an upgrade of the paraglider. You're no longer gliding. You got upward momentum.
Except instead of wood and a cloth, it's metal and gasoline.
I just want to ride. I just want to ride a dragon. Just make it scale bound.
Oh yeah.
Scale bound Zelda.
Well, then Loft Wings. We're coming back to Loft Wings again.
Yeah, but dragons are so much cooler.
Isn't that canceled?
Yeah, that is canceled. Okay. That's why I said bring it to Zelda.
I always thought, because from interviews and stuff that people that went behind closed doors or whatever and seen the game running, they always said stuff like the game ran very poorly on the Xbox. So my thought was always, they're going to downgrade the heck out of the game, release it on Xbox One, but then the actual version that you would want to play would be releasing alongside the Xbox One X. That never happened though, because that was always it reminded me of,
so mad that game got canceled,
the Last Guardian when it was on PlayStation 3. Shuhei Yoshida in it's not recent anymore, but like whenever they were announcing the game for PlayStation 4, in an interview, he mentioned something about whenever the game was always being shown off on PlayStation 3 at E3, it was running at like 15 frames per second. So it was running at half the speed, and then they would double it so that it would look like it was running at full speed and 30 frames per second. Because the PlayStation 3 wasn't powerful enough to do what they wanted to do with it, which is why it stayed in development hell for so long, because the console just wasn't powerful enough to do what they wanted. But anyways, second to last question. Jonathan? No, sorry, we already answered that. Slop.
Yep. Well, that's the final question.
What's the final question, Daniel?
Do you think the Switch will become one of those consoles where it keeps on getting iterations of itself, like Xbox One to Xbox One S, Xbox One XX, Triple X, etc. So,
I mean, you could have just replaced that with 3DS.
Well, that's the thing is Nintendo totally.
XL,
Nintendo does this.
DS, DS Lite, DSi.
NES and an NES 2 before there was a well, no, actually NES 2 came out after Super Nintendo, but technically it was just an upgraded NES. And then there was I have a Super Nintendo, and then the Model 2 Super Nintendo, which is a little bit smaller. And yeah, it's the same thing. They have, I think I don't think they did it with N64 or Xbox.
Well, they were going to upgrade the 64 with that,
or Gamecube.
The disc drive, but that didn't work. And
but then there was like
DVD player add-on, the DVD built-in player, one that only released in Japan for a short time, like GameCube.
Wii U Deluxe.
Nintendo's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I have a video where I mentioned this. That actually, I got a few different videos that mentioned this. Like ever since the original Nintendo console,
Game Boy Advance SP.
Like if you follow the pattern of every single Nintendo console that is released, it's more likely that Nintendo will release an attachment or a new iteration of it. The original Famicom had the Famicom floppy disk system. The Super Nintendo had like the thing that attached to it, so you could play like the BS games, the Satellaview stuff.
Satellaview, yep.
And with Sony, they had a planned disk drive that would have made it more powerful, similar to what the 64 disk drive would have done. That led to the Philips CDI. So some of the
Nintendo PlayStation.
Some of the best Zelda games that we have ever gotten came because of them wanting to upgrade the Super Nintendo.
That's why I love how he phrased it, where he put in, will it become one of those, quote unquote, consoles? It's like, what do you mean? You mean like every Nintendo console ever?
Yeah.
Except for
like the DS and 3DS are the best examples, but they've been doing it all along.
The most modern examples would be those where they gave you a new iteration that also had slight hardware upgrades.
Yeah. Every single Nintendo console ever, aside from the Virtual Boy and the Wii family, has had something to attach to it to upgrade it, or had a brand new version of the console release.
We did, but it was a downgrade.
The Wii Mini.
Yeah. There was that, but like the
downgrade.
The GameCube had something that you play the Game Boy Advanced games. You could play on the internet with the game or with the GameCube. Nintendo 64 had the disc drive. Game Boy had Game Boy Color, and then
there was Game Boy Pocket, then Game Boy Color.
Yeah, and then Game Boy Advance had the SP. DS had like 5 different iterations: DSi, DSi XL, DS Lite. 3DS had new 3DS. After Miyamoto was in an interview, I always like to mention this. Miyamoto was in an interview where he was asked, like, face to face with the interviewer, saying like, "Will the 3DS have another version releasing? What do you have to say to the people that are waiting to purchase a 3DS because they want to purchase the XL version?" And Miyamoto was just like, "We at Nintendo have no plans to release any other version of the 3DS. He basically saying like, we perfected it with what we have." But then like a few months later, they have the 3DS XL release. We have the 2DS, or the new 2DS XL. And then we have the new 3DS and the new 3DS XL. So when he said there wasn't going to be another thing, we ended up getting 5 more things.
Womp womp.
So like now if someone asks Nintendo, "Hey, is there going to be another version?"
Don't believe Nintendo unless they say there is going to be.
Yeah, if someone, and then it might happen like the disc drive, and it's like they promise it, but it still doesn't come out. So
So, like, is there going to be a Switch XL? Probably. Is there going to be a Switch Mini? Maybe. Who knows? Probably. Yeah. There anything you could think of. Is there going to be a Switch, that's like a new Nintendo Switch that uses the Tegra X2? Probably, because this is what Nintendo does.
I would say early 2019 we will get another iteration of the Switch. Like, not this year, but early next year.
What I actually think it would be more interesting is if the Tegra line keeps going the way it is, the Tegra X line. If that happens, in theory, Nintendo could just keep making new versions of the Switch that makes it kind of like a PC, in that everything's always backwards compatible forever moving forward, which I think is what most gamers would love to hear. But
myself included.
I just don't know if that's actually going to be a thing, but as long as they're going to keep the Switch as a brand.
But I worry about it because the 3DS, like, there's like things like that you can only play on the 3DS XL or the new 3DS XL that you can't play on an original 3DS.
Yeah, and that's what makes it complicated. Yeah. Like, on the original 3DS, you can play new Super Mario Brothers, but then on the new 3DS, you can play Xenoblade Chronicles, which can't play on the original console.
And if we're honest, Hyrule Warriors Legends should not be playable on the OG 3DS either, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's like games that have new in front of the title can be played on both. But then there's games that doesn't have new on it that can only be played on the new system.
Yes, the new title's dumb. They should have never used it. But
Did you? There was an interview where Miyamoto said that they thought about naming A Link Between Worlds New Legend of Zelda. I think it was A Link Between Worlds.
They love that. Nintendo's in their own bubble, man.
Stop. Because the thing is that New Super Mario Bros. Is over 10 years old. It's an old game that's called New.
Yeah, it's like you go into GameStop and you're like, hey, do you have a used copy of New Super Mario Bros. For a used new 3DS? And they're like, what?
Like, shut up. Stop. No, they're probably the only people that know what you're talking about. But I just imagine being someone's, like, that kid and your parents mean really well, you know, and they want to buy you a nice gift and they see you have a 3DS, so they buy you a game, and then you can't play it because it only works on the new 3DS and you don't have that.
So fun story about that, right? So for this Christmas, my parents got my daughter a 2DS. The one that came with Mario Kart 7. I'm assuming they hit a Black Friday deal on it. Great, cool.
Right on.
Good for them. Well, she's really into Minecraft, so they got her Minecraft. And the guy at the store repeatedly told them, this will play on her system. This will play on her system. I took one look at it, and I'm like, no, that's not going to play on her system. She needs a new Nintendo 2DS XL. She can't play it on a standard 2DS. It says it right on the box.
Wow.
And my parents are like, well, it just says new 3DS. I'm like, I understand this is confusing for you because you're not part of the Nintendo family. But yeah, it will not play on standard 2DS. We don't believe you. That store person said, I'm like, Mom, this is what I do for a living. Watch. Okay, you don't believe Melody, can you put this cartridge in your console quick? Yeah, sure, I want to play. Oh, it won't work. It says it's not compatible. I told you, she needs a new Nintendo 2DS. Oh, how much is that? I'm like, twice the amount of the one you just bought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were so mad. She has a 2DS XL now. We returned that one. Now she doesn't have Mario Kart 7, but oh well, she can play Minecraft and she loves Minecraft. So.
All right, there you go. So here's what we're gonna do. We have one final question left that I'm gonna let Nate answer, but everyone in the YouTube chat, because there's 46 people watching us talk about stupid stuff. 1 or 2 people comment your question in the live chat. After we get done with this last question from Nate, Daniel will pick one person from the chat to read their question. And then the podcast is over. You can go home. You can catch up on the Royal Rumble, because that's what I'm going to do.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So
I'm opening up the chat now. So let's hear this question,
right, Nate. Do you have from?
Yeah, I got it open.
All right, from Ilya Rose, the very last question.
All right. Says, my mother and I both heavily enjoy Legend of Zelda games as well as Mario Kart and Mario Party games, but we would like to branch out a little. What would y'all recommend?
From Mr. Nintendo, what game would you recommend for them?
Okay, so it's for a mother and daughter that enjoy Zelda, Mario Kart, and Mario Party.
So this isn't the Switch, because Mario Party is not on the Switch. So they're either talking about the 3DS or the Wii U.
I have to know which system, of course.
So
if it's Wii U, go get Pikmin.
Probably look. I mean, Zelda's in there, kind of throws a little wrench in there, because I was thinking it's something co-op.
Triforce Heroes or Hyrule Warriors.
Which Zelda game?
Triforce Heroes, or
if it's on Wii U, Hyrule Warriors is fun multiplayer.
Hyrule Warriors is a nice co-op too.
Super Mario. Well, yeah, Super Mario 3D World on Wii U. Multiplayer is really good.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, that game's a lot of fun.
I completed that one with my fiance, actually. We beat that together. That one's really, really good.
Oh.
Or even like the new Super Mario Brothers U is still really good multiplayer as well. For co-op. I mean, it looks like you're basically into party games or Zelda, and it's so hard because like if you're talking about just playing single player Zelda, but enjoying watching each other play it. Like, it's so hard to be like, well, in that case, get into any game. Get into Metroid. Get into, like...
Wasn't there the Wario... The Wario Party game on Wii U?
The WarioWare game or whatever it is.
On Wii U.
Was there one on Wii U?
I think it was Wario.
I know there was a WarioWare. I think there was on Wii.
I don't know.
Who knows now?
I usually love the Wario games, but like the last two I really wasn't too into. I think the last one I liked was Smooth Moves, or whatever. I can't remember which system that one was on. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Like you're like Ilya, you and your mom are like right in the middle of like the heart of Nintendo games. And you're talking about Zelda, Mario Kart, Mario Party. Pretty much anything that Nintendo publishes that isn't
Nintendo Land.
Yeah, Nintendo Land. Like that isn't Bayonetta is probably something that you should try. Because Bayonetta is just total left field for Nintendo. So like forget that and forget Xenoblade Chronicles. But like look at all the other franchises that they release. Anything Nintendo has published, you and your mom are probably going to highly enjoy. Because like I was even say maybe not Pikmin, but then I was just shocked. My fiance actually really loved Pikmin 3. Yeah.
Pikmin's like the bomb.
I didn't think she'd like it because it's like a strategy thing. But she's like, I don't care. I just like having those little people and telling them to do things. I'm like, okay.
It's like being a parent. You got your little people. And
it's a lot easier than being a parent.
Okay, true. And it only lasts a few days instead of a lifetime.
But yeah, I mean, really, the thing is, the fact that you and your mom love Zelda, Mario Kart, Mario Party really just opens everything. Smash Bros. Might be another one you guys highly enjoy. Especially because you're going to recognize a lot of characters from Zelda and Mario in there. Like there's just a lot of good stuff out there. It's hard to suggest like just one. It's literally if you like those three, you're gonna like 90% of what Nintendo released.
Yeah, just stay away from like Metroid, Bayonetta,
Yoshi.
Yeah.
The Yoshi game.
Yoshi game on Wii U is really good.
Yoshi, yes, get that one. I love it.
Kirby's
I love it so much.
Well, that game too, on Wii.
All right, so Daniel, it comes down to you. Pick one.
I mean, I don't want to be a jerk, but you guys watching this, you got to give me some better questions. I don't want to be mean, but I just want one that really like is really good, and a lot of there's a few that are just like, what should I have for dinner? I don't know, man.
Someone mentioned our good friends at Commonwealth Realm.
Yeah. It talks about timeline placements. I don't want to get into that because
that's gonna be
because you know what, I've heavily put out there my own Breath of the Wild timeline placement theory.
Daniel, here's a question
many
for
times. You. Okay.
Duo Master says, "Why is Daniel such a sadistic person?"
Because it is the only way.
Thank you for asking that question, Duo. I've been wondering for years.
It is because
Golden Son.
I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and growing up in that household has turned me into an evil, horrible person. I love my brothers, I do, but like I was a kid, they locked me in the freezer once.
Yes.
And then sat on the door.
I locked myself in the freezer once. So.
Yeah. So, I don't want to offend anybody with my saying that I want better questions, but like a lot of the questions that are asked here, we've addressed in previous episodes.
Here's funny. Kayla asks, "Will Mario ever see Zelda?" Zelda has seen Mario. Because Zelda has pictures of Mario in her castle.
In Hyrule Castle. That's true. Do you count Smash, Kayla? Because if so, I mean, Link's in Mario Kart. Who knows what'll happen next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think the question I'm going to settle on actually comes from Duo Master. He says. Do I want to pick that one? I don't know, man.
Angel has a good
person.
Get Angel.
On you. Come on.
Angel has a good one.
Angel. Oh yeah. Do you guys think Koizumi should be involved in the making of the next Zelda? And if he does, what do you think would change?
Now he's the one that's in charge of Mario
he's Mario Odyssey. Yeah. I don't know, man.
He used to be involved in Zelda way back when.
Hold on, I'm gonna look up the last Zelda game he was on. Koizumi.
Yeah, I don't remember if the very last game he was involved in.
Also, Aztec Warrior, what we want to see at E3. I know Jesse and I have gotten into this a bit, but Nate, what do you want to see at E3? Other than Yoshi? Give me Yoshi.
He was a supervisor on Majora's Mask 3D.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He has a special thanks in Skyward Sword, whatever that means. Like, he came in for a day and was like, I turned on everyone's computer before they got to work.
He was in charge of distribution of high fives.
It was probably one of those things where like he came in one day and just had like an idea on something he saw.
Yeah.
Or he came in one day with donuts.
Assistant director on Wind Waker.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say I know he was heavily involved with Eiji Aonuma early on.
Yeah.
Because...
Game system director, game design, character design, and event design in both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And he was a script writer on Link's Awakening DX and Link's Awakening. And on A Link to the Past, he printed the artwork for the manual. So he literally he took some pages over to the copy printer and was like, "I helped, guys. I helped.
Look what I did."
No,
it's come a long way, I guess. Since
it really does say that. It really does.
Yeah,
it says printed artwork.
He's done a lot of stuff around Nintendo, but it was all the he was always one of the big figureheads for the series early on, and stuck with it until I guess Eiji Aonuma was ready to be all on his own.
To be the Zelda guy.
Yeah, but now he's the Mario guy, producer for Mario Odyssey. That's
Well, he was a big spearheader for the Switch's release as well. Like all those early, like with that Switch presentation, he pretty much spearheaded that whole thing.
Was he the one that was shaking
the magic of HD Rumble?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just because isn't he the right now? Isn't he the head of the development of Switch?
Yeah.
Pretty sure he was the top dog on the development. Now he wasn't necessarily the one who made it.
He is deputy general manager of Nintendo EPD.
Yeah.
Which is planning and development.
Yeah. Yeah, his role changed after Iwata passed away. But he was leading the group that came up with Switch, so.
HD Rumble.
So
I want... What type of Zelda game could he make?
Well, here's the thing. First he says, do you guys think he should be involved in the making of the next Zelda? I don't think he can be. I think he's risen to a position now where a special thanks for a one idea he had walking through the office one day is pretty much all you're gonna get from him, because he's got too much. I mean, if you think about it, he is at the head of basically development of all their future hardware. When does he have time to stop all that and work on his Zelda game?
Yeah. I have to wonder what he got that special thanks for other than donuts. Can you imagine if he walked through the office, they're working on Zelda, he's like, "Hey guys, what do you think about riding giant birds?" And they're like, "What?"
The game was gold. It was done. They were ready to start printing, and he just said, "You know what, guys? I'm throwing you all a pizza party. Good job." Quick, special thanks.
Put that special thanks in there. He brought us donuts on day one. Now he's throwing us a pizza party.
Man. I mean, that's the thing. I don't think he should be involved anymore.
Oh.
That's not because he doesn't have the talent or the skills. I mean, obviously he does. And I liked a lot of, the fact that he wrote, he was one of the script writers on Link's Awakening is amazing to me, because it's one of my favorite stories in the whole series.
Yeah.
He always felt like, to me, based on stuff I've read from him in interviews, that he cared a lot more about story than Miyamoto's. He was always a nice balance. Or Miyamoto's I don't care about any of this crap, and he's just but dude, this stuff is awesome. So I really care about this. I want the story to interweave with your gameplay. Kind of the yin and the yang there, but I don't know. He's moved on to such a high position now. It's kind of like asking, should Miyamoto get involved again? Miyamoto doesn't really even make games that much anymore.
Yeah, he's the creative fellow. Whatever that means.
Yeah, that's actually officially his job title.
He basically gets paid to come up with ideas and be a figurehead.
All right, Daniel, Miss Click is going to give you the final question.
Okay, but first, I just want to say Damien Shelton said Link's dead. No. No.
What?
Okay.
Where did he say? Link's dead. Is he talking about that theory that's been debunked by
certainly
Eiji Aonuma himself, who said it's not?
Yeah, the theory that
we've talked about that theory and how we hate it.
And then AJ Noble like literally came out and said, "I don't like fans come up with crazy stuff. I don't know why they say this because I understand you get these emotions, but then they're literally missing every other emotion that happens in the game if you just it's just about the 5 stages."
There was one, I think it was around the time Majora's Mask 3D released. Al Numa was asked about that, and Majora's Mask was the first one that he was in charge of. And he said, if you play the game with that in mind, it is interesting, but you're literally playing the game wrong. And it's like
he just basically said Link's. I mean, he didn't come out outright and say Link's not dead, but he's basically like the whole theory is based on this thing that isn't at all what the game is supposed to be. So that if the 5 stages of grief isn't true, then the whole theory's dead. Yeah. And you know what sucks about that whole theory? I was editor-in-chief at Zelda Informer when the 5 stages of grief theory was formed because it originated on Zelda Informer. And that led into the Link is Dead theory, which it was a combination between Zelda Informer and Zelda Universe at the time for that theory, and I hated it I always thought it was cool, but I always hated it. I'm just like, no, he's not dead.
No.
He's not
It's
dead.
a fun thing to discuss, but never something to take seriously, in my opinion.
He's still alive at the end if he's dead.
And also,
just you know, like if he's dead. I mean, the thing is, part of me wanted to believe it at the time because I was like, you know what? I guess if Link's Awakening can be a dream, Majora's Mask can be purgatory or whatever. But I'm like, just no. Like I never, like whenever the 5 stages of grief thing came out, I'm like, but I felt other emotions there. I don't know.
Miss Click let us down.
Where's our question?
Yeah.
Miss Click.
Where is it?
She popped in, showed some hearts, and then she left. She said she'd give a question.
Hold on.
I don't know how to tag people on this.
Well, Kayla, possibly with a silent K nib, asks who would carry on Zelda if any or all main directors died or quit.
So if everyone who's ever led us,
let's just say they all just died right now.
Is dead. Who would run
like there's an earthquake in Japan, and all of the Zelda team dies.
Miss Click's working on it. I would get. So there used to be a Twilight Princess HD fan project before the official remake started, headed by Tomoya, who is now working on a fan-made sequel to Twilight Princess. The art style of it, because he has live streams of them developing the remake. It looks better than any other art style aside from Breath of the Wild, is my personal thoughts on it. And then there's the person who's working on Link's Awakening 64.
Oh, yeah.
Who used to make HD mods and stuff for Twilight Princess. And then... so aside from the Twilight Princess fan sequel, the fan-made remake of Link's Awakening using the 64 engine, the third would be the guy that is making all of the Unreal Engine 4 Ocarina of Time stuff.
Horizon.
Yeah. So if you got those 3 together to work on something with like everyone's teams working together, I think you'd get something really interesting. So,
yeah.
If it's not Nintendo,
okay. Miss Click has a question. Also, Yoshi's not a dog. For everyone in the chat asking if Yoshi's a dog, I never know.
Yoshi's a
dog. So Miss Click asks, what? Yeah, given where they said they didn't want the newer generation of Nintendo devs and whatnot to be too big into Nintendo work and games. I don't know if that makes sense. 200 is hard to meet.
They are trying to diversify their company. I mean, if you think about it, Splatoon and ARMS came out of groups of people that are the younger generation of Nintendo.
Yeah.
They're trying to... Nintendo kind of realized, I think... I don't know why it took them this long to realize it, but they realized that they aren't like what they used to be. They've been too reliant on their IPs.
Miyamoto.
Yeah, Miyamoto specifically,
yeah.
but like
creative fellow.
Just IP, like their IPs in general, like everything. They'd have a new idea, but they would somehow shoehorn it into Mario and Zelda instead of trying to make a brand new game or concept with it that wasn't Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, etc. So like they they're trying to bring in people that can continue the role they've been on. Because ARMS is, I think, generally going to be considered a success for them. It sold over 1 million units in a genre where like the top fighting games only sell 1 million to 2 million units. So that's got to be considered a success. Splatoon's obviously been a success. Codename Steam kind of shot and missed. I would have liked to see that game get a second chance on Switch just to see.
They had the Fire Emblem crossover.
Yeah, Fire Emblem crossover as well with SMTX Fire Emblem. I forget what it was called. It was really, really good. No one played it. Yeah, I hope they get the Switch. It was so good. Oh, yeah. It's so good I can't remember what it's called, but it was so good. But yeah, oh man, that's just, I guess, the way I look at it, as they're trying to diversify their team to have more of these Splatoon and ARMS games come out. They don't necessarily need to be based on those concepts, but you know what I mean. More new IPs. Which is exciting.
I want a Splatoon adventure game.
Like more of their single player, like if they put more effort into it.
Yeah. Splatoon's really fun. So
Tokyo Mirage. Thank you, Token Geek. Thank you.
So I guess that wraps up all of our questions. Nate, thank you for joining us on such last minute.
Yeah, you asked me like 2 months ago, and then Cricket asked
I think I also asked you separately.
Yes. I've been asked to come on this podcast many times, and I say yes every time, and then it's just...
All right, so Nate, why do people? Why should everybody care about you?
They should. They don't know me. They shouldn't care about me.
No, but you do awesome
know me.
Nintendo videos.
Basically, I like to feel that I provide something. You know what? I'm gonna give you a reason to check out my stuff that my fans give, because I've asked them before, why do you guys watch what I do? Because I don't know what about it is entertaining to you or what about it's nice. And a lot of what I get is that I am a big Nintendo enthusiast that is not afraid to criticize Nintendo. I'm open and honest and genuine as a person, which is not something that a lot of people would have said about me like 6 years ago. Glad to know that I've grown a little bit and learned from past mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm just gonna. That's really the basis to watch. And what some people also mentioned in a recent video I was doing is that I seemed very knowledgeable about what I'm talking about. And I guess that just comes from all my years of experience at Zelda Informer. I'm also, I'm in my 30s now. Like, I've been doing this a long time. I'm not new. I'm not new to this reporting on Nintendo News Game or talking about it. And I care a lot about the quality of the content that I put out. You guys can maybe even tell when you're watching this, and you see like my green screen in the background, and like I got those microphones back there, and there's a mixer. Normally, even for this thing, I would bring up all that stuff up here, but I'm using my streaming setup right now, so it's just easier because we're streaming. So why not just use what I already have set up for that? But even like the quality of the camera and like the editing work, I suck at editing. I'm nowhere near Daniel's level over there.
Aww.
But I'm sure Daniel could see some of my work now and then look back and remember what I used to be like and be like, oh man, he's gotten better. Because I care about the quality. I care about the quality of my work more than the people that watch it care. Because they all just say, we're coming to hear what you have to say about stuff. It doesn't matter how good it looks. And I'm like, it matters to me.
All right.
So yeah, I just care. There's no real reason. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I have all these credentials. You should come watch me because I've developed this game here and I'm a programmer over here and I'm this. And like, yeah, I'm in college for programming and I've done all. So who cares? Come watch me if you like talking about Nintendo and hearing someone who tries to be a unbiased Nintendo fan.
All right. And Daniel.
That's heartwarming. That touched my soul. Well, hopefully you guys all know me. I'm Daniel. I'm the guy who is in the chat protesting that Yoshi's not a dog.
Or a cat.
Or a cat.
Misclick commented Yoshi's actually a cat.
I co-host this podcast right here. You should follow me on Twitter at @CaptBurgerson. Same with Instagram. I'm on Jesse's Discord, so if you tag me, you can chat with me. I may or may not reply. I'm only semi-active on there. You can find
closer to that 1,000-member goal.
So. Getting so close. We're at what, 850 now?
Yeah.
Or have we gone up past that? I don't know. It's awesome. I don't know either. We could check, but who's got time? You can find the videos I work on my own channel, NSHG Films. I also edit videos here for Jesse sometimes, and I also work on McIntyre and Chamber of Sages, those YouTube channels, which are also pretty cool. And every year or so, you might see a video by me on Nate's channel.
Yeah, literally, like once a year.
Okay, so Token Geek donated $2 and says Yoshi is a dog.
Okay, well, because you gave us money, yes, I guess he is now. Wait, but he has a dog. What about Poochie? Where does he come in?
Yeah, that's...
I don't know. Well, who would you rather be, though? Would you rather be Poochie or Yoshi? Yoshi's constantly punched in the head by Mario.
That's a myth.
And Poochie, it's not a myth.
That's hearsay.
It's not even hearsay. It's been confirmed now.
Oh, we're getting a lot of compliments now.
He's clearly pointing forward. Okay, the worst. No.
Goofy
if you wanted to go,
hey, there's your defense.
You want to know,
Goofy has Pluto.
Yeah. Okay, good point. But if you want to go in that direction, not only does Mario get punched, he also gets thrown off cliffs just so Mario can make that jump.
Yeah. Like, he's the greatest sacrifice side character ever.
I love Yoshi. It breaks my heart when you get to that part in Super Mario World. It's just like, why do you make me do this? Who thought of this, Nintendo?
Taco Bird says Goofy is a dinosaur.
Confirmed.
Yeah. All right. So I am Game Over Jesse. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, everything / Game Over Jesse. So it should be.
I wish I was that simple.
Yeah. So head anywhere you would like. Please join our Discord, which is linked in the description. Go check out Nate's channel, Nintendo Prime, where my channel mostly focuses on Zelda. His focuses mainly on Nintendo. So similar content, but more variety. So, yeah, thank you all for watching. We averaged around 30 to 50 people during the live stream, which was more than I thought would want to listen to three guys talk about video games. So, thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nate, for joining.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, for joining. Sorry when it went over your hour limit.
One guy in the basement, one guy in the closet, the other. I don't know where you're at, Jesse.
Where are you, Jesse?
I just see a wall. So.
We're just three Nintendo dads. One in the closet, one in the basement.
We should have called this the Nintendo Dad Podcast.
Oh, there is one.
Mm-hmm.
I used to watch Nintendo Dad's pod. I'm in the bedroom.
Oh,
yeah.
One in the bedroom, one in the basement.
The wall.
We're covering the full gambit of a house. For all you guys know, we're all in the same house.
Oh yeah. Yeah. See, if I reach out of frame over here, you'll see my hand come over and tap.
Oh wow.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you guys for joining. And we are